Welcome to the Oddcast, episode 67. We have a very special guest, so without further ado, let's just get into it.
It's me. I'm the special guest, right? That's you. No?
No
sorry.
one wants to see you, mate.
It's Pauline Hanson. Senator, thank you so much for joining us here on the Oddcast. Very, very excited to have you.
Oh, thank you very much. No, it's been wonderful to be able to talk to you. Just have a casual conversation and see where it goes.
Well, that's exactly where I'd like to kind of go with this, because you're talking policy everywhere, Sky News and all sorts of media channels. And of course, anyone can follow One Nation on social media or go to your website. Policy is everywhere. I'd love to take a moment to talk a little bit about you, the human. And there's a particular thing that fascinates me about certain people, and very few people have this, and this is why it fascinates me. Everyone has this view of somebody should do something. But it's a relatively rare individual that says, I'm going to do that thing. And so I'd love to sort of start talking a little bit about that. But I actually want to rewind before that. Everyone knows you owned a fish and chip shop. How did you go from Pauline Hanson, the high school girl, to the fish and chip shop owner? Was that an ambition? Had you always wanted to be in food service? Was that something that you fell into? Tell us a bit about that journey into business.
No, I had a lot to do before that. Geez, I left school at 15. I started working in my parents' shop behind the milk bar at 12 years of age. And that's where we learnt the work ethic. So then when I left school at 15, I went to work for Drug Houses of Australia. That was in West End, Brisbane. I did that for about a year. In between, I worked in my father's shop on a Thursday night. So I'd finish work from 8:30 till 5 o'clock of an afternoon. Then I'd come home, I'd put on my uniform and wait on tables from 6 o'clock till 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I'd go and do my job the next day at Drug Houses of Australia. That age, I was about 15 and a half, going on 16. And Dad would pay me $5 for the night's work. And I'd walk upstairs and say goodnight to Mum and hand her over that $5 for my board. Now, that was big money in those days. Dad paid me seniors' wages, whereas I was only getting paid $16.30 for a week's work at my full-time job. So it taught me the work ethic, and I watched my father work 106 hours a week for 25 years. So I'm one of 7 children, 5th in line, and I'm the quiet one of the family.
I can imagine your Christmas dinners are busy.
Carlz, can I pause you there? I was already going to say you and I actually have more in common than what I realized. And then you got to your family. I am also one of 7. I am also the 5th in line, but I am definitely not the quiet one in my family. I can tell you that for sure. But the value of a work ethic, the importance of being a maker rather than a taker, is that something that you feel we've lost over the last number of decades in Australia? To call somebody a bludger used to be a terrible insult in Australia. It used to really cut to the heart. Where do you think we're at with that now?
I totally agree with you. When I was growing up, people didn't want to go on welfare. It was just something that was never done. And people were embarrassed to say they're on welfare. These days, one woman said to me, she said, I get in my car and I drive out of my driveway and the neighbour's next door and he's sitting on his deck and with his cup of tea and, says, bye, love, have a nice day. And then she comes home and guess what? He's still sitting on his deck, but he's got a beer in his hand. How was your day, love? And she said, it makes me mad. My taxes are going to pay them to just sit there and, capable of working, but don't want to. And we're now getting a generation that are on welfare. And I think it's wrong. People, don't realise it's the people that are out there working, paying their taxes that gives you the lifestyle. A lot of these people want this lifestyle because it suits them, and they don't want to go out and work for it themselves. I think it's terrible.
Pauline, can I ask you something about that? Because at the moment, there's all the discussion around capital gains tax, and the small business community and the entrepreneurial community feel absolutely blindsided by it. But there's a video that Topher and I played a few months ago. It was by the ABC, and they were interviewing these young girls. They couldn't have been more than maybe like 19, 20. And there was a line that they said in there that stuck with me. And they said, they were talking about how they can't work They've got ADHD and a whole host of like ailments that have them qualifying for the NDIS. And one of them said, and I can't get it out of my head, she goes, I haven't been able to get my autism diagnosis yet, but once I do, I'll get more from the NDIS. And then the ABC go into their house and they show their room and they've got like toys, like they've infantilized themselves. And so I talk up a lot about the small business community, and I speak often about, say, Adrian Portelli. I'm not sure if you're familiar who Adrian is. He's the Melbourne billionaire, and he's a young guy, and he grew up in the western suburbs of Melbourne like I did. And he's now, I actually don't know his net worth. It's over $1 billion, and he gets called the Lambo guy. And he does a lot of great initiatives for Melbourne to get the young kids engaged. He has a huge car collection and invites all the kids down. And yet people, the media specifically, will do everything they can to make him look worse, like the evil billionaire, the evil overlord who doesn't pay his taxes. And then when I make commentary around it, it's particularly the youths who are saying, you know, he should be paying more taxes, he should be contributing more. And yet these same people in the same breath are looking for those diagnoses to disqualify them from working. You know, this seems to be a new group of people who are incentivized to be on welfare. How do you think we can even start to fix that? I know that's a massive issue, but what are the steps we can take?
It's the messaging that's been put out from governments, and they're making it very easy for people to get on welfare. You know, people have to apply for jobs. All they do is ring up these companies, and then the companies, and I'm hearing them all the time, all these businesses offer them jobs, and then they don't even turn up. They're all getting them sign off on it to continue to get their welfare payments. It is a real problem that we have, but I think we need to start in the educational system. Instead of teaching them how to fill out a welfare form, tell them how to fill out an employment form and to be responsible for themselves, which they're not. So it is a huge problem, but the governments have allowed this to happen. It's the mentality that you owe me something instead of standing their own 2 feet and building their own future. Now, these kids might think they've got ADHD or slight, autism, and you said, and it's right, because it's taken parents 6 months to get in to see a psychologist to get it sign off on autism to get onto the NDIS, which is wrong. But there's some members of parliament, I've got to tell you, that do have slight ADHD. So they're quite capable of actually working. You can work with it. So it's just that tells me these people are lazy. They don't want to work. They feel entitled. And that's what we the age of entitlement. And I get fed up with this tall poppy syndrome that people who have been successful, who've made something in their life themselves, which this country has given them the opportunity to do it, and it's all this pure jealousy because they don't have it. They don't want anyone else to have it. And these kids wouldn't even understand the taxation system or how it works. So anyway, I've got no time for them, to tell you the truth.
Pauline, you are speaking my language. I am always talking about tall poppy, and it's rife in this country. Where do you think it stems from? Like, yes, the government's part of it, but it seems to be culturally embedded into us in recent decades.
It has, and it's been very much in recent decades because people are constantly, and I think that reality TV and what they see on their programs is ingraining in their thought process of, well, these people have it, why can't I have it? And without realising I think they don't want to put the work and effort. Like I said, I grew up with the work ethic. Even when I was mother since 1987 and I had the children, I still went to work. I was not going to go on welfare, and I didn't go on welfare. That's when I worked the hours that I could. That's when I borrowed everything to buy the fish and chip shop that I had to provide for my family. So, people need to change their attitude, and the governments have got to stop this welfare handout mentality. And when we've got 900,000 people on job start or job search and that type of thing, and they've been on it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years plus, I have a problem with that too.
Yeah. So, Pauline, you've partly answered my next question already. I wanted to come back to your journey and your story. And you've talked about learning the value of $1, learning the value of hard work and being a maker rather than a taker. And then, of course, some time passed, you became a mother, then you became a single mother. And from what you just said there in the last question, you actually bought the fish and chip shop after that. And so was that a strategic decision on your part because you felt that you were going to be able to be more present for the kids if you were doing that rather than a full-time job? Like, what was it that made you decide that that was the right path for you at that time?
Topher, I went through, I was single, mother at 21 with 2 children.
Yeah, wow.
3 and 6 months old, all right? So I had to provide for myself. So I was working then at that stage, and I used to work at the Grand Hotel, the old Grand Hotel on the Gold Coast Southport before it burnt down. So I was working there at the time. So I've been a hostess, I've done bar work, I've been manager of a bar in that line of work. Then I actually met my husband, my second husband, and then that was the mid-70s, late 70s, and we married and we ran a plumbing business, which we started up together.
Okay.
He was a plumber. So we ran that for 9 months. So I used to get out on the tools with him. I used to get up and do roofing or guttering or blockages and you name it. I did everything. So I used to work with him. So I understand about employment because we employed 3 apprentices. And that's why I knew about employing people. But prior to all this, and I should go back to when I was married at 17, 18, we started up a business with my parents, my first husband, with my parents in a chip making business in Brisbane.
Right.
And was the first ones where we made those chips that you'll see now, McCain's chips and all that. Well, we started that first off in Brisbane, and we went around. We made the chips ourselves, and then we bagged it, and then we went around selling it to restaurants, and we were selling it at 8 cents a kilo for these chips, potato chips. So they could go straight into the deep fryer, you know what I mean? And that's what it was. We started that. But my parents actually sold the business. I wanted to keep it, but my father said no. He said they were retired at that stage, and my father said no. He said, you're too young and you got a child and you didn't have the support from your husband to work beside you. But I would have loved to have done that business. Who knows where I would be now. But so there's been a lot of things that I did. So after my second marriage finished from the plumbing business in 1987, that's when I was working at the Bowls Club at Bouval and Ipswich, and I was only part-time work, and it wasn't enough to pay the bills. That's when I went and borrowed everything to buy the shop, which was a rundown business. I worked it 6 days a week by myself. I had one girl on a Friday night for 2 hours, one girl on a Saturday night for 2 hours. And it was 10 years later I sold that business, and I built it up there. We had 6 on a Friday night and 3 on every other night. And then I was open 7 days a week. So it was a well-known business. And I went to the fish markets. I did all my own buying for 8 years at the fish markets and to have that fresh product. And I was the only female buyer at the markets who owned her own shop.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's so refreshing to hear a politician talk about small business because, as we know, very few of them have ever worked in the private sector. But you brought up something about apprenticeships, right, or apprentices. My partner has a race car, like he works on race cars, right? He has his own shop, and he cannot find an apprentice. And those that he has found who have come in for a trial don't want to work. They honestly don't want to get their hands dirty. And they're working on cool cars that on Instagram everyone would want to be around. But when it comes to actually doing the work, very few of them actually want to do it. And not only that, when he does have apprentices, he has got so much paperwork to do, and they're constantly going back to their TAFE to do their workbook stuff. And there's always these excuses. And, you know, without throwing his previous apprentice under the bus, there was an example where the apprentice just wasn't up to speed. He wasn't retaining the information, and he wasn't young. He was in his late 20s. And so there's so many protocols to make sure they don't fall behind. So you get the supervisor in and you take them through the process. And it gets to the point where the Fair Work Ombudsman gets involved, and they're like, you know, you have to do everything to stop this kid falling through the cracks. And I would also argue that a lot of that cushioning, a lot of that cotton wool is actually to the detriment of the apprentice. He wasn't cut out for the job. And yet, because of all of the bureaucracy that's in place, you keep people in jobs they're not qualified for or shouldn't be in, rather than putting them in somewhere where they would actually genuinely excel. And so now you're at a point where, and I hear this from small businesses all the time, they can't get employees. They can't get employees who want to work. And because of Fair Work, I mean, I know it's probably different in each state, but in Victoria, it's almost impossible to enforce these employees actually working. And now we've got Jacinta Allen, who's trying to legislate 2 days a week working from home. It just feels like for small businesses and entrepreneurs, it's stacked against them with all of this policy. And if you've got people like Albanese who have been in politics his whole life, making decisions, who do not understand the burden on small business owners. And so, sorry, Topher, what were you going to say?
Well, we need to get to a question. We've only got Pauline for a limited amount of time. I guess, Pauline, my question out of all of that would be, would you go into small business today yourself, given how much the landscape has changed? And what would you do to try and make it easier?
No. It doesn't interest me to go in small business again, although, I've been a small business person all my life. The trouble is the industrial relations that's been brought out by the governments is stifling any business that wants to put on anyone. Now, there's problems that I've heard. Say that person is stealing from your till, it's very hard to be able to get rid of them. If they have drug or alcohol problems, you've got to get them counselling. If they, problems with it, most of the businesses are dragged through the courts because the rights of the employer is far greater than the rights of the employer. That's why a lot of people won't put them on. Carly, what you're saying is about the apprenticeships, you're right. We had a different system then. Those apprentices wanted that job, worked hard, and they didn't, go and cry and whinge and carry on. Oh, you work me too hard. What I'm hearing all the time, even from the hairdressers, okay, they said, we have an apprentice in here. All day they're either on their phone, or the fact is by the day's end they're tired, they're worn out, they can't cope with it, and then one rang in, said I'm sick, ends up coming in the next day with sunburn. They were sunburnt, and then they said, oh look, I can't stay because I can't put the right work shoes on my feet because my feet hurt and sunburnt. So therefore they had to go home. Employers are fed up with this. The attitude of the young ones, not even the young ones, but others, that use this as an excuse because they don't know how to work. And I believe this goes back to the household, how they're brought up. Do they have to do anything in the household? Are they made to look after their bedrooms? Are they, taught to do anything? Even stacking the dishwasher at home is a big issue with a lot of these kids. It has been over a period of time that, they feel that they're entitled. All they want to do is play games, watch TV, play computer games, or on their phone all the time. And this is the big problem that's carried through, and it's in the work. Another big thing that I think is happening is that in the educational system, everyone's a winner. They feel that you don't have to strive to better yourself. So therefore, when they hit the real world, it's a shock to them. They thought, my God, I really have to do something. And they can't cope. It has been an ongoing for a long time. Get straight back in the educational system, change it right from the beginning there, the mentality, how people think, and they've got to be taught to actually strive to better themselves in life.
Pauline, you just brought up something then, sorry, Topher, about the education system. Yes, at the primary and secondary level, definitely needs an overhaul. But I've just gone through the tertiary system again. I did my bachelor 20 years ago, and I've just finished my master's. And it was a private uni, but the indoctrination is so you cannot escape it. From the way that you're meant to speak, doing the welcome to country, doing the pronouns, and being so careful with your language. I keep thinking of 1984, right? Like you've got to do the. What's the word they call it? Not the free speech. The
2 minutes of hate in 1984.
Yeah, it's like that. And so whenever we were doing our presentations, when someone external would come in, you had to do the welcome to country. You had to pronounce your pronouns. So much so that the actual learning itself is taking a back seat. You've got to do this little pantomime of wokeness first, and then that becomes the qualifiers for everything. So
questions,
at the end
Carl,
of
we're doing questions.
No. I'm saying What can we do to our tertiary education? Because it's basically pumping out zealots. And we know this. This goes back to 20 years ago. We've got a whole lot of Marxists in our tertiary education system. How can we start to repeal things and bring it back to just learning? They've been indoctrinated.
It comes down, that's right, it comes down to the government legislation that depicts what courses are available at the universities. So if you're going to do these degrees that actually lead nowhere and lead to this rubbish, then the government should not be funding with HECS debts. Cut it off. Only just put in programs that is going to be beneficial. No HECS debt. You want it, you pay for it. Well, I tell you what, they won't have many turning up for it. And as far as this,
100%.
yes, is being pushed onto it. I've heard from people, even students, say, we don't want to do this, but we have to go along with it. Otherwise, they mark us down and we won't get passes. I'm hearing it all the time. Our universities have been taken over. And when I first got elected in 1996, 2 lecturers came into the office and they said to me, Pauline, we've been told to teach this way. If we don't, we're going to lose our jobs. So this has been going on for the past 30 years that I've been aware of. Wow. And until actually change around, rein in the spending, the money's given to the universities, set the agenda, what's going to happen from here on. I'd get rid of all this Aboriginal rubbish that's been taught, welcome to country, everything that's done, even in psychology courses, they have to acknowledge that you're white privileged and acknowledge what we've done to the Aboriginal people of this nation. It's pure rubbish as far as I'm concerned, and I wouldn't have a part of it if I'm ever in a position to have balance of power in this next parliament or government, that all that rubbish will go.
This is so refreshing to hear, Pauline. It's like common sense is making a comeback.
My turn, Carly. My turn. Pauline, I want to get the next step in your journey, because where we last touched on was where you had bought this fish and chip shop, and now we get to the bit that I'm actually genuinely fascinated by. If I was ever to do a PhD, it would be studying exactly this.
You want my recipe of batter, don't you? We've got my famous recipe of batter.
So you don't know this, but I know someone who used to frequent your fish and chip shop when you worked there, and they have nothing but glowing things to say about the food, the experience, the staff, the way they were treated, the atmosphere. They are one of your biggest raving fans, but no, what I'd love to know is you recognized that something was wrong in Australia, and you made that shift. There's lots of small business people, fish and chip shop owners, metaphorically speaking, who recognize that something's wrong, and they say somebody should do something. How did you go from somebody should do something to I will do this? Now, of course, early on that was nominating for the Liberal Party. We know the journey, but I'm interested in the internal journey leading up to that moment in time. How did you was it in a moment? Was it a slow realization? What was that journey for you?
No, what happened is that a fellow that I knew at the time, he knew the Mayor of Ipswich, and the Mayor of Ipswich, which was Dave Underwood, was thrown out in 1993 by the current council. And he was an independent, the whole council was Labor. Anyway, they threw him out as mayor. And I said, I can't do that. He was elected by the people. So anyway, they were then going to run a team. And then I thought, I'm going to run for council. So then I put up my hand, and then I had a falling out with them. And I was my boyfriend at the time, but we had a falling out. So he still went with the mayor. And I thought, no, I'm involved in this now. I'm going to run for council. So I won the seat, and I was on council. Well, the first, the Monday after I won the seat on the Saturday, they were counting votes. You know, Topher, I was so tired and worn out. I actually went to bed, and I didn't even know till the next morning, read the newspapers, that I won the seat. I wasn't So anyway, I realised that I won the seat. So I'm working in my shop on the Monday, and these council workers came in. They said to me, and they're carrying on, the machine broke down again, and they were doing the roadworks with this laser bitumen, and they're carrying on. They said, we keep telling them it's past its use-by date, go and buy a new machine for $185,000. You could rent it out to the other councils. Well, that makes sense to me. And then I wanted to, I said, well, look, let me know more. I said, I'm the new councillor. So anyway, when I told them that, they said, oh, God, they shut up. They didn't want to tell me anymore. But as it was, as it turned out, I took that information to council. I argued with the mayor and the other managers and that, and the benefits of getting a new machine, because it was costing the council $2,000 an hour every time it was not working. So anyway, they got the machine. They took my advice. They got the new machine. But also, I was brought to my attention. We were going through drought that time, and the workers, the council workers, were taking out the trucks on a weekend, hooking into the pipes, filling it up with water, and selling it to the farmers. Now, that was brought to my attention by my customers. I got to welcome my customers. Anyway, I got that fixed as well with a meter that was put on the trucks. And another thing they brought to my attention was that the tyres on the trucks were actually taken off and sold before the use-by date. And, of course, it was brought to my attention. So what I found at that period of time was the managers were coming to me asking would I definitely come to the council meetings, because I was prepared to question and to do something about the corruption that was happening. And I stood up to the mayor and I got changes that were done, which they appreciated. But I got a lot of satisfaction out of getting a lot done for, the local communities, just different little things. And I got on very well with the council workers. And so anyway, I think out of that, I got a taste of politics, and I thought, I really like working for the people and getting things done and sorting out the waste of money. So that's when they formed an amalgamation again of council. So I was only in it for a year, and they changed the boundaries. They all preferenced me last. I lost 132 votes. But that enabled me to then go and join the Liberal Party of August 1995. And I won the pre-selection in the November. And then I went on to write a letter to the paper calling for equality for all Australians, which set John Howard and the Liberal Party, and they disendorsed me 14 days outside the election. So it was just me and my campaign manager. And I said, I'm going to stand for this as an independent, which I did. And the whole public came to my aid. I manned the 42 booths with all people coming from all parts of Australia. And I won that election with the biggest swing in the nation of 22%.
Yeah, incredible.
Well played.
Incredible.
Pauline,
we've got 2 minutes left. Carly, what's your final question?
So, Pauline, recently you put up that Albo's stripped you of funding for staff, right? And you're saying that he's got all the staff and it's very disproportionate to yourself. But what you do seem to have, and I think particularly post the Bondi massacre, is a whole host of new wave of independent journalists and social media, I'm going to say influencers for lack of a better term, who I think cannot, like, Albo can't catch a break, right? Like, it doesn't matter whether it's in looking at NDIS or government expenditure or the new budget. How can those people help people like yourself who are campaigning for change? Because we know that Albo has the ABC under his wing. The Liberal Party are basically useless at this point. But with all this new wave of people who want to be involved, maybe not run, how can they help you, and how can they be part of this new resurgence of common sense in Australia?
Yeah, it was after I came back and formed the party again in 2015. I was out of politics for 18 years, and I was out of the party as leader of the party for 13 years. I was forced out of it by other members of the party. So I walked away from it in 2002. So I was asked to come back to lead the party, and I built it up from nothing. And for 10 years, I wouldn't have branches because I knew the problems that we had the first time around with branches. Now, I've just opened up branches we started opening up branches around the country last August. We've been inundated with people that have come on board to join the branches, to be involved, because I want to bring the people on the journey with me. I want them to be part of this movement that's happening across Australia. So if you want to, have that input, join a branch. But I'll say to people also, because you've got a lot of people who've never been involved with politics before in their life, this is all new to them. And it's about understanding and working together. If it's not run to, a fully, what I can say, an organisation that you expect better. It's because people like you, and they've never done this before. It's about coming on the journey together and helping each other. But from those branches, the people are going to elect their member of parliament, as the branch did to select David Farley that won the seat in Farrer. I want the people to have involvement in this. I want policies from the people, grassroots Australians. I want them to get out there and help us on the polling booths to get our members elected to parliament so that we can actually start working for you and bringing in change and legislation. It's people power is what will change it, not Pauline Hanson on my own. But I'm getting a great team around me, and it's not easy because we've got a lot of people who haven't been involved in this before. But don't underestimate our ability to be able to bring change for you. That's what I'm going to go for. I'm going for government. I'm going for it at the next election because I'm fed up with what's been dished up to us for all these years and people living in poverty, stress, a lot of problems that are happening, losing our industries, manufacturing, farming sector, our resources, everything that we're losing. I want to give people back hope that we can get back to the country without that stupid ideology, climate change BS that's been fed to us. And I think that we can do it, but I'll do it, with the people beside me.
Well, that's Pauline, we've gone over time. Thank you so much. There's so much we haven't talked about. We haven't talked about the fact that the Liberal National Party have suddenly discovered your policies. They said for ages that you don't have any, and now they're stealing them all. I'm
not going to explain this because I tell you what's very important to me. All right. I'll tell you another one that we're talking about apprenticeships earlier, Carly. In 2018, I took the Liberal Party kicking and screaming to take up my apprenticeship policy. Anyway, that was the first year the government would pay 75% of the first year's wage, 50% of the second year's, and 25% of the third year's wage. They put out 1,360 apprenticeship schemes, which was taken up in 3 weeks. The proviso also was it had to be in rural and regional areas because I wanted to keep the young ones there and not for the communities to die. They've said they'll bring out more further down the track, which they never did. Now, that's part of my policy. We have to get our homegrown tradesmen and women, not bring in skilled migrants from overseas. So apprenticeships is very, very important to me to get them to work. The other one that I took them kicking and screaming was The Voice. I was the first one to come out against The Voice. My feeling, it's about being united as a country. Don't divide us on The Voice. The Nats came out 2 weeks after me at the Liberal Party about 4 or 5 months later. The CO2, carbon emissions, net zero, is my policy from day dot, right? All the way along. I haven't changed at all with that, and also getting out the Paris Agreement. The other one has been the age pension. That means pensioners who actually can work unlimited hours after they get their age pension without affecting their healthcare card or losing their pension.
100%, yes.
Who have knowledge, experience, and want to work so they can get out, socialise. They've got a few extra dollars in pocket. They're going to pay tax on the income they make. Why stop them from working? Beer tax was another mine. The excise tax on fuel was another my policy, which Morrison took up for 6 months. That I pushed him to take that up, and it has been this time around. I came out with it before then. You got the road user tax, which was another one, and the indexation on tax brackets. That's been discussed on the floor of Parliament by Malcolm Roberts, who moved the bill for it. 2024, I brought in a private member's bill to change the Sex Discrimination Act back to male and female. That was back then. I saw the writing on the wall where this all going. They didn't. So that was another one, and they're just now picking that up as well. The citizenship, we're cutting back on mass migration. That's where I pushed the Libs, and they've taken up that policy. Taylor has now come out, and 8-year wait before you get your citizenship, which has been my policy. So that's another one. So it's just this. That's only to name some. Superannuation, using it for your deposit on your house. That was my policy I brought years ago. So there's been a lot of things that I've done, but I've had to pull the Libs back to the Conservative side So there's a lot in that.
Senator, I promised you hand on heart that we would be done by a certain time. We're now 5 minutes past that time, but I'm laying the blame for that firmly at your feet. But that was
I could keep talking. I have so many more questions, but
we will have to have you back on, Senator. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to let you go because you do have other commitments, but thank you so much for coming on the Oddcast, and we will have you back again.
Yeah, look, thank you for having me on, because I hope people find this informative and to understand, what I want to do for the country. And I just tell you that I'm bringing out my gas policy, and that's the vision for the country. This, the 25% on tax will only destroy the gas industry. We won't utilise the resources that we have. And that reservation policy will also destroy it. And that's what the Greens Labor want. They want to destroy our
that's their
resources.
agenda.
So I'm going to bring out my gas policy, and it's about a vision for the future.
Love it, Pauline. It's so nice to hear common sense.
It's so rare. We're going to let you go, Pauline. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, that was cool. Something a bit different.
That
was awesome.
Unusual Wednesday for me.
Yeah, a little bit different. I'm actually glad. So I was planning on coming down to do this in person with you this week because I'm running out of opportunities to do that before I go to the US. In the end, that didn't work out. And actually now I'm glad that it didn't, because we had Pauline Hanson on the show.
Yeah.
Like the magic of technology and editing, I really hope that our scheduled interview with Pauline, which is meant to happen in about 2 hours' time from now, actually happens. Because if it doesn't, and then we have to publish this without Pauline at the start, that's going to be really weird.
We're going to look like dicks, which is not unusual. But
Pauline, we are counting on you to show up for the scheduled interview. Hopefully nothing goes. I'm sure she would if it was within her control. The problem for someone like Pauline is there are so many demands on your time that not everything is under your control. So fingers crossed that she does show up, and that we've just finished enjoying a wonderful low-key chat with Senator Pauline Hanson.
And either this is going to be now the low point, or it starts as the high point because it's starting like this. Either way, here we are.
You're either laughing at us or with us. Yeah. Either way, hopefully you're having a chuckle. Alrighty, there is other stuff going on in the world that we do need to talk about. And it's been another one of those weeks where it just feels like stories that are kind of these long, slow burn stories have a lot of them have taken little steps forward. We're seeing some crazy stuff coming out of the US with Thomas Massie and the GOP primaries, and libertarianism within the GOP versus MAGA within the GOP. We've seen some movement there. We've seen some interesting movement on crime in Victoria, some tragic stuff there. But also, some hope that actually we might be going to see some common sense. But can I start with something that I find very difficult to admit and acknowledge?
Okay. Are you going to admit that you're wrong, or?
Okay. No, not at all. No, it's way worse than that. I do that all the time. So we've just seen in Australia, there's these proposed budget changes to capital gains tax and how that gets treated, and also to negative gearing. Now, for those that don't know, and I'm working on a video on this, the abolition of negative gearing was tried in 1985 in Australia, and they switched back to having negative gearing in 1987 after rents in capital cities such as Sydney jumped by over 50% in just 2 years. They actually tried to get rid of negative gearing in New Zealand only in 2021. They have no capital gains tax in many circumstances over there. So they've got a better capital gains tax treatment than what we do. And they tried to get rid of negative gearing tax benefits. And once again, they reversed the decision after only about 2.5 years because rents went to record levels. So as things stand right now, if our Prime Minister gets these changes through, Australia will have terrible capital gains tax and no negative gearing. New Zealand will have negative gearing and much better capital gains tax settings. And this is where it gets hard for me. They're actually doing something about government spending.
So we're moving to New Zealand, is what you're saying?
You can't just rip that out without warning. Like I need trigger warning. Can you not? Can you just?
I could live in Queenstown tomorrow. I could be there tomorrow.
I will say
love New Zealand.
New Zealand actually is fabulous. Auckland, I didn't love. Auckland's just kind of awkwardly placed, no pun intended. It's just a city, but it's also on this weird sort of peninsula between the two coasts, and it can get really congested and hard to get around. I wouldn't want to live in Auckland, but then by the same token, I don't want to live in Sydney or Melbourne or Adelaide or Brisbane either. So that's kind of just me and cities. I don't really love them. I will say the South Island of New Zealand is truly spectacular. I mean, if you want to live somewhere where out every window of your house is a postcard, go and live out of town in the South Island of New Zealand. It is just fabulous. But
I've said that before, like Queenstown, I love the snow anyway, but if I could make it work, I would live in Queenstown for sure. I don't want to be too far away from Australia. Like I know we always talk about moving away and whatnot. Every time G and I have serious conversations about it, I feel this like this big horrible stone in my chest. I'm like, oh, I don't want to live somewhere so far on the other side of the world away from home and what I love. I love traveling there, but like across the ditch, that's doable. I could do that.
And here's the thing: more and more people's income is being liberated from their geography.
Yeah.
We talked about this before, but I'll brush back over it again. We are in an era of decentralization. For literally all of human history, living in a city has meant more opportunity, more economic opportunity, better services, better healthcare, better this, better that. Everything's better if you're in a city, apart from maybe sanitation and mental health. Those are the things that suffer as the cities get bigger. But in all the other practical ways, you get richer, your life gets better in every other measurable way. But we've entered this really interesting phase where it used to be if you wanted electricity, you had to live in the city. If you wanted a telephone, you had to live in the city. If you wanted, to be able to be within an hour of healthcare, an hour's drive of a hospital, you had to live in the city. Well, nowadays, the internet has made the communication and the doing business really genuinely universal. We have a situation now where it is possible for someone who's willing to spend the money up front to have a completely off-grid electrical grid. Yes, there are some limitations. Yeah, you're probably going to want to have a diesel generator there because otherwise your battery is going to have to be stupidly oversized. But within some limitations, you can have electricity anywhere you want it pretty much if you've got money. And even things like access to hospitals. Well, these days, the cost of things like helicopters and planes and so forth, yes, okay, I am still talking for the wealthy, but it's rapidly becoming more and more accessible and more possible to do. So you no longer have to live in a big urban center in order to be able to participate in global commerce, to be able to enjoy modern conveniences and modern technology. And so this decentralization is now possible that just wasn't before. Add to that the introduction of robotics. So manufacturing is now being scaled down. If you wanted to be a manufacturer, you had to go for economies of scale. You had to go for the biggest machine that did the most number of units that you put into a factory. These days, we've now got robotics and automation coming down at a economically viable scale that is a lot smaller. Nowadays, instead of having planes that cost millions of dollars doing crop dusting, farmers are getting drones that are programmed to go and do it. And yes, okay, it still involves work. You got to look after them. You got to program them correctly. But ultimately, costs are coming down. The size of the machines are coming down. The scale of farm, just to use that same farm example, the scale of farm, the scale of paddock that you need in order to have a crop duster come and do its thing is now a lot smaller because the machinery is smaller. We're watching this happen in so many areas of life. And so this logic that has been true for genuinely thousands of years and certainly true for the last few hundred years with electricity and sewerage and communication and so forth, that logic is kind of fading. I'm not going to say it's been flipped on its head, but it's fading. And living in a backwater like New Zealand, maybe it's not so bad.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people now who are genuinely thinking about this. I mean, we've talked about this before at length about, the right amount of wealth. Like, what's that sweet little number? And, we were sitting here in my office the other day where we're trying to get everything finally like hardwired and set. We've got all the technology now. We've got the laptop back and all that. And I made this comment to G, like, to be honest, we're not wealthy, but boy, we have everything, don't we? We've got everything we need, could we have a fancier house? Sure. Could we have fancier cars? Sure. Could I have fancier clothes? Sure. But as far as like need, everything's met. You know, I'm sitting here in front of me. I've got every bit of tech gadget I could ever possibly want.
Yeah.
And the best thing is, I could up and move it tomorrow. I mean, we're renters anyway, so touch wood, we don't have to leave this house. But you know, realistically, I mean, apart from some big furniture, we could have put it all in suitcases and relocate.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Australians have recognized that now. I mean, prior to that, you wanted to be around the family unit, you want to be close to your village, basically. And also you had to be close to the proximity of your workplace. Whereas now, you know, options are open. And I think people are starting to really recalibrate what their values are. I certainly have. Like, I always thought material wealth is what I wanted. You know, I used to think that once I got to that pinnacle of success in business, I'd be satisfied. That's shifted completely now. And now my idea is just like unrelenting freedom. And for me, freedom does require obviously a level of wealth, but freedom also requires to be liberated from a government that's trying to control every faction of my life and tax me back into poverty, you know?
So two things very quickly. Firstly, there's a really important mindset shift that you sort of explained, but kind of glossed over. So I want to slow down for a moment there. The shift from focusing on what could I have that's better to look how amazing what I have is. Because if you're focused on, I could have a bigger house, I could have nicer clothes, whatever, that never ends. Doesn't matter how big your house is, you can still think of something that you're missing out on. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how big the diamonds around your neck, how expensive and how exclusive the car, there will always be another thing. So that is a road to perpetual dissatisfaction, no matter how successful you are. The key is to shifting that focus and going, wow, look how amazing what I have is. But also what you mentioned there about the phrase, the terminology is jurisdictional competition. You just want to live under a government or to preferably not live under a government. But if you're going to have a government, you want one that's not actually making life harder and worse for you. And along with that decentralization of technology that I discussed a moment ago, there is now opening up the opportunity for a massive decentralization of politics, a decentralization of power in your life. There's a guy called Andrew Henderson. He runs a thing called The Nomad Capitalist. He's put out heaps of videos online.
Follow him.
If you're interested in this sort of stuff, I recommend you go and watch his stuff. It'll take you a little while to tune in. Just accept that you're going to have to watch 10 of his videos before you really start to tune in. But I recommend starting by searching for 5 flag theory and 7 flag theory. It's just his various sort of iterations of flag theory. And what he talks about is separating your life and deliberately planting it in different governments on purpose. So most of us take it for granted that everything in our life is going to be under the same government. Where we live, the passport that we hold, where our business is registered, where our savings and banking accounts are, and where our investments and where we build our wealth, that it's all going to be under the same government. And so when we think about leaving or moving, we think about picking up everything all at once and moving it all, like take everything out of one bucket and put everything into a different bucket. His whole philosophy is, what if you actually spread your risk? So you live in the place that suits your lifestyle best. You invest in the place where the returns and the governance are what you want it to be. You register your business in the place where it's going to get treated best from a tax point of view, and so on. And you split your life according to, and put each part of it into the place where it's best. And then if one of them goes bad, well, then all you're moving is that part of your life. They change the tax laws wherever you've got your businesses registered. Well, now you've got to register businesses in a different place and move that. But it's not everything. You're not picking up your entire life. If where you're living turns bad, you change where you live, you move to a different country, get residency in another country, do whatever it takes to have that piece of paper in another country. But you're just moving house. You're not upending every single aspect of your life. So I'm working towards that. I'm loyal to Australia. I love Australia. I hope to grow old and die and be buried in Australia. But I am working towards distributing my life and decentralizing that political risk. Because what we're seeing today is that Australia, we can't count on Australia continuing to be a safe place for every aspect of our lives going forward.
G and I are genuinely planning for this. You know, we've said we were in Cairns over the weekend. That's where his grandmother and his mum live, and his grandmother is now almost 101, right? So good genes in that family. But we're sitting there and we're talking about, you know, and I was asking his grandmother, what do you think? Sorry, let me tell the story correctly. We're talking about the whole tickle versus giggle thing, right? And, you know, as an almost 101-year-old, she's just sitting there going, I don't know. And she's very with it. Like she's very lucid. Anyway, so we were talking about things, and then I was introducing them to AI. So anyone who's done my masterclass, I teach you this, how to chat to your, like literally have a conversation with your AI. And I was showing them. So I put on Claude, and Claude is this very sexy British man. And we were talking to them, and his grandmother was just like, I don't understand what's going on. We call her Chops. And she's just sort of like trying to get her brain around it. And then I said to Claude, I was like, hey, Chops is 101. Can we go through all of the major technological advancements she's seen in her lifetime? And it was listing things that I didn't even think about. And it was just so beautiful to reminisce with her. And, we had like 3 generations. And I was thinking this, I was like, to her, it's unfathomable that we have AI and that we have access to now. But now with me and AI and what I see is happening, and I'm trying to stay ahead of it, I'm like, everything is possible it's been democratized to the point where all you actually need is initiative and drive. Everything's for you. And if you allow me, may we enter a tangent?
Ooh, I thought you were going to say, can you play a reel? I thought we were going there all of a sudden.
I have one of those, but I need a tangent.
Well, I'm going to assume that I haven't sung the Tangent Time song for the entertainment.
I did plan a tangent for Pauline, so this could be weird. Yeah. But I was like, is that going to be weird if we tangent with Pauline? But we'll see if I do it or not.
I'm going to say, at the moment, she likes me, and I'd like to keep it that way. So I'm not going to sing the Tangent Time song while she's on the show, which means it's time. Reach for the mute button, everybody, because my voice is pretty croaky. Tangent time, tangent time, tangent time, tangent time, tangent time. Alrighty, Carly, take it away.
Okay, so this conversation that we were having, I'm writing my book at the moment, right? So Chicken in the Noodle.
How could I forget? You're like a vegan. You find a way to weave that into every single conversation.
That's so true. So there's a chapter where I talk about hyperconsumption. And, it's quite confronting at times because I'm part of this, right? Like I'm not critiquing everyone but myself. I definitely play my role in it.
She says, as she's surrounded by a squillion dollars worth of semi-disposable Apple computer technology. Yeah.
And so that got me thinking, right? So this next thing I went into last night, I had a bit of time. G was upstairs gaming, and I have all of these YouTube videos saved that I want to watch that's more educational, like updates to Adobe and updates to this. And I never quite find the time to do them. I'm always busy. We're always busy, right? And I was like, okay, I got 2.5 hours. I've got like 70 videos saved. I'm just going to watch them with all attention, not like passively watching. I mean, like
And so zoned in.
Yeah. And I was like, so I've been playing in the Adobe suite for 25 years. Like the first time I played with Photoshop was when my dad brought back a CD from Hong Kong, right? It was a pirated copy of Photoshop. And I've seen all of the changes and the growth, but because you're in that ecosystem all day, every day, you don't really think about it. It sort of just becomes innate. And it has gotten to the point where in the last couple of years, I don't necessarily use InDesign or Illustrator every single day. I still use them, but just not as prolific as I used to. And there's been a few changes to the workspace and a few things I'm like, I don't even know what that is. I was like, all right, I'm going to watch this Illustrator video. And it showed me a couple of things. And honestly, my jaw was on the floor. And I just had this like moment, when you like go into like in a movie, they go into this tunnel and you go, and it's just like everything starts flashing around you. I was having one of those moments. I was remembering when I was 18, my first year at uni, opening Illustrator up and being like, wow, like there's so much to learn and having to do everything manually. To fast forward to today, AI does all the drudgery, all the banal stuff that I used to hate that would take me hours. Like deep etching and like reanimating and moving things around if you want to change the angle and drawing vectors. AI does all that now. And then I'm looking in front of me, exactly like you said, I've got my Rodecaster, I've got a Stream Deck, I've got 2 computers running simultaneously, I've got an iPad in front of me, I've got lights and shit everywhere. And I'm like, there is no excuse today. There is no excuse. Everything that's in front of me, aside from the computers, yes, they're a bit more pricey, but there's nothing here that is completely inaccessible. I don't have a Rolls Royce, if that's what I'm trying to say. So yes, okay, the computers are a couple of thousand, but everything else is achievable. You can do literally anything now. You can buy it on Amazon and you can make it. If you want to be a YouTuber, if you want to be a graphic designer, You've got YouTube that has a plethora of people willing to teach you the thing. Any issue that you have, like G and I are having an issue at the moment where I'm filming this on a 4K, but we didn't realize that because we didn't have this one little part, it's not uploading at the high quality because you need a thing. YouTube it, boom, learnt it in 30 seconds.
Because that's how Apple gets you. They make you buy all the little dongles and widgets just to have everything function at the most basic level.
It's not Apple. So anyway, that's a story for another thing. But I'm using Elgato teleprompter with a Canon and Rode, and they all need a thing that makes it.
You know what Elgato is? It's literally the cat.
Elgato is the brand for the teleprompter.
I know, but the brand is the cat.
Oh.
Like, yeah. Don't ask me why, but that's what it is. Anyway, carry on. Carry on.
And so I was sitting here, I was having this moment, like I just bought these recently. I now have about like 5 different microphones, but these are the little Rode microphones, right? And you plug that into the bottom of your phone, and then that's your little, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
This was $200, and that's better audio than half the stuff in front of me. And it just literally plugs into your phone. I'm sitting there going, 10 years ago, you didn't even have a quarter of this. Everything was so manual. Everything took so much time. Now, this technology that's available, like I said, most of this stuff is fairly accessible through Amazon. Some things are a bit more expensive. And then, is that a flute? Did you just pull out a flute?
I'm not going to play you the flute. I'm going to do some show and tell in just a minute when you finish your tangent.
And so, yeah, and now you have AI. So I'll give you an example. I'm building a book for you at the moment, and you gave me a bunch of Word docs, and I already have a pre-designed thing, like template made in InDesign. And I'm like, oh, this is going to take me hours to copy it all across, like literally copy, paste, move it around.
Copy, paste, yeah.
And I'm not going to say this so that you give me more work, but I'm like, there has to be an easier way to do this because I'm going to lose a whole day today otherwise. And
that question has done more good for humanity than almost anything else. There must be an easier way. Or how do I get this done without so much work? Laziness is the mother of invention.
Well, I'm just, you know what it's like when you're self-employed. We have so much on our plate, and I'm like, if I give it,
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying we should be grateful for people who've said there's got to be an easier way.
100%. And so I'm looking at my to-do list, and it's a mile long. And this task, this book that you want me to make, I'm like, that is literally 2 days of work, and I don't have 2 days to give it because I've got everything else to do. I'm like, there's got to be a way. So I jumped into Claude and I said, this is my conundrum. This is what I have access to. What's a simple way to do it? And Claude's like, well, give me the design you've already done. Give me all the Word documents. I'll compile, I'll put it all into one document and lay it out kind of like you want. And then you just import that into Canva, and Canva will make it completely editable. And then you just have to like rejig it and just make it pretty. And I'm like, wait, what?
Do that. That sounds good. Yeah.
And so I did that, and it spat it out. And it's a bit janky, but you know, it will take me an hour to tidy it up as opposed to doing it over a day.
It still needs the human touch, but it's done a lot of the drudgery.
Yeah, and so this is why I'm such a massive advocate for AI. I'm like, holy shit, the stuff that I'm good at, the aesthetics, the making it pretty, the marketing, all that, I don't get a lot of time to do that because I'm doing all this boring work, and I can't afford to employ someone to do it for me. And so that's what we have AI for. That's why I'm optimistic. But my point comes back to this. All of the tech we have, all of the, the plethora of videos on YouTube to learn new skills, it is accessible. Yes, you have to invest a little bit, but for the most part, a lot of it's relatively cheap or free. There is no excuse. Everything has been democratized to a point where even now with you and I doing these videos, doing the podcast, we are doing a better job, arguably, than the ABC because we're able to do the things that people want to do. We're not, we're not stuck with having to please a board or, having editorial control over us. And so what you're seeing, and this is why I was so buoyed over that thing I talked about on Monday with all the expense reports, is because of the accessibility to this cheap tech and people learning how to do things, that expense thing that we were talking about, I made a little reel on that. It's gone viral, and other people have done their versions. People feel like emboldened, firstly, to now have these conversations, but second, they can do it, and they can do it in a day. So this government now cannot get in front of these stories because you've got citizen journalists, for lack of a better description, ready to pounce on it with the tools they need. They don't need ABC to come down with their big truck and reporter and 2 camera crew and all that. That shit's done. That's dinosaur crap. And I noticed this the other day because the Herald Sun has started doing reels kind of like how I do them, you know, with like the green screen and things popping up and then talking. I'm like, even legacy media is like, wow, these guys have got a point.
The ABC too. I mean, my wife just sent me an ABC thing that someone sent to her, and I'll hit it and let you sort of see it. I'm not going to play the audio, but it's literally just someone get it in front of my face so it focuses. Literally someone sitting there, words come up on screen, and then it just goes to these cutaways of these AI-generated little paper house type setups. Like that's our national broadcaster at work. They are copying our style, not the other way around.
Isn't it amazing? And so what used to be like, oh no, you couldn't possibly do it this way. And I'll finish with this one last tangent. So we talked about before Matt Armstrong. It's a channel on YouTube. It's a British guy who's been learning how to do cars. And I thought this was spectacular. So an influencer, I think, in the US had a Bugatti Chiron, but it's like
Chiron, yes. I know the story a little bit,
It's the fancy one. Anyway, whatever.
It was the Chiron, was it not?
Was it? But wasn't it like a something sport? Per Sport. Chiron Per Sport.
Yeah. Sure. Okay, yes. Yeah.
So it's like limited edition and it's a $6 million car.
I think Bugatti Chiron is already limited edition enough. I think that's already impressive enough, Carlz. We don't need the rest of the resume.
But the Per Sport makes it even more fancy. Anyway, so this influencer reached out. I love it when you have crossovers too. Like, you know, Matt Armstrong from the UK comes over to the US, whatever. So Matt Armstrong's like, I'm going to help you rebuild it because it got written off and then they bought it back at auction. And I think they bought it for a couple of $100,000. So this is a $6 million car. They've got it and it's totaled, right? And so they reached out to Bugatti to get the parts, and Bugatti were like, absolutely not. There's only 2 people on this planet that can pull that car apart. Like, no way, it's not safe. And Matt Armstrong's like, okay, challenge accepted. Now, he's already done a lot of exposés on the fact that, like, you know, the indicator might be from a Ford Focus for a Lamborghini Murcielago. And he pulled out the airbags and their Audi parts, right? So a lot of the parts he was going to go to Bugatti for, he's been able to source. And they're genuine parts. It's nothing.
To be fair, Bugatti have spent a lot of its life, I think that might have changed recently, but they've spent a lot of its life as part of the Volkswagen Auto Group, which is part of that same company. And it makes perfect sense. There's nothing wrong with Audi airbags. But if you buy that same part through Bugatti, they will charge you an enormous premium for exactly the same part.
100%. And so what the biggest problem they had with the Per Sport was that the subframe needed to be fixed. And there was also a massive crack in the gearbox. And Bugatti were like, no, not happening.
Yeah.
And so what they've been able to do, like, so I'm getting a bit technical, but the subframe and the chassis were welded in the middle, and Bugatti like, there's no way.
Bonded is the term, yes.
Yeah, and then Bugatti's like, there's no way you can get it apart. We have to do it. You can't do it. And they did it. The boys pulled it apart. They got the gearbox out, and sure enough, there was like some things, and they figured out how to weld it. I don't know what the technical term is, but they were able to fix it just with a bit of ingenuity, and they tried some things and it didn't work. Anyway, they put it back together. It's not perfect because they don't have a lot of the outside carbon fiber yet, but it started and they were driving it. And it's like, so isn't it funny how these old, not the Bugattis old, well, they are, but you know,
as a company, they are,
these big companies, they want to hold on to it with such a vice grip that it ends up having the opposite impact. Like, I understand they're trying to protect their brand integrity, their IP and all that. I totally get that. But what happens when you hold on with such a death grip? It actually goes the opposite way, and it's to your detriment. Because now 6 million people on YouTube and counting have seen you be an absolute jerk to people and not selling them the parts, even though it's a $6 million car, and people learning other things. So if Bugatti had just sold Matt the parts, they wouldn't have this expose on them. So this is the same with the government.
But the Bugatti would be sitting there going, yes, but the people watching Matt Armstrong aren't in the market for a Bugatti. None of them are buying a Bugatti anytime soon. So protecting our brand for that one person who will buy and losing our brand for the 6 million that never will might be a gamble that they're sort of willing to take.
I disagree. Okay. Matt Armstrong's a bona fide auto celebrity now. Like anyone in the automotive industry knows who he is.
Yeah. No, I'm not disputing that. It just doesn't, not everyone that watches him is in the market for a Bugatti or a McLaren or any of these.
No. But it's interesting because I think a lot of these legacy brands, legacy institutions and media think that because they always did it the right way and they're the journalists and they've got all the integrity, that all these young whippersnappers popping up, they can't do it better because they don't understand it. It was like, well, they can because they're more dynamic.
So on that, I've been testing my travel kit. I've done 2 interviews now, one with Malcolm Roberts, one with Pauline Hanson. And yes, I had audio issues with the Pauline Hanson one, but I now know why, and I know how to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Even that, the Osmo Pocket, like 10 years ago, that didn't exist. That is a 4K camera in your hand with a freaking digital touchscreen on it. Like,
it's what? And it's phenomenal. So the speed and the accuracy with which this adapts to the different environments. So I'm releasing a video later today, an interview that I've done with Jake Wolke, who's a farm owner and a butchery owner. And I did some cutaway footage just with this. I'm just walking along, hand holding this. The gimbal gives you this stability. I did some filming inside his meat fridge where he's hanging the carcasses of these animals. And so we opened the door and it was black, or almost black outside. We opened the door and there's a moment of flare of light from inside and it very quickly adjusts and the color looks beautiful and the light is just right. You could walk outdoors, you could walk indoors, you could do anything with it, and it just adapts and handles it really, really well. So there's this. This was a couple of $100. This wasn't cheap, but it was well under $1,000. I've got the latest DJI Mic 3, which is a little bit bulkier than the ones that you were showing before, but nevertheless, they're not exactly big. And again, plugs into the back of either my phone or it plugs directly into the DJI. And it was that's what failed when I did my interview with Pauline, was that this wasn't talking to this. And I now know why, and I know how to make sure that doesn't happen again. So all good. But that's my entire audio setup for 2-person interviews. And of course, the camera has its own microphone as well. And then this is my tripod, right? It's a monopod. It has feet that stick out, and it's height adjustable using air. So it won't go down until I push these buttons, and now it'll go down again. Now, I could take this carry-on. I'm not going to, but it's so lightweight. You could take it carry-on. And I was looking at having the camera that I'm filming on now with its lens is over 1 kilogram by itself. It needs a full-size tripod. You can't trust one of these with something that's a bit heavier up the top. So all of a sudden, I've got another kilogram's worth of tripod. Everything else around it starts to get heavier and bulkier. And suddenly I'm sitting here going, I can't afford the luggage space for this setup. So it's quite phenomenal to think that for less than $1,000, I've now got an international travel kit that I will use all over America, and I'll do lots of interviews with, and I'll do lots of content that'll be released as part of the Topher project. This is probably the camera that I'll be using when I do the Oddcast. I'll probably plug this in and use it as a webcam in the computer because it's got a much better image than what my laptop's webcam has. Less than $1,000, and I've got a super simple, super basic, granted, but very functional, and in today's world, very acceptable production studio. And it's like, that's happening everywhere. It's particularly noticeable in areas of technology and cameras and everything else. Sure, that it's especially happening there, but this is happening right across the economy. You can make money in so many ways. And speaking of which, have you ever thought about making money creating poison and selling it as alcohol? Because apparently a lot of people have figured this one out.
These stories are wildly fascinating to me. I mean, I don't drink booze, so I have no skin in this game. But you remember a few years ago now, I think it was the young girls in Laos who were there for their schoolies or something, and they drank ethanol and they passed away. Like, that to me is just bloody outrageous.
Okay, so then cast your mind back to Victoria. Last year sometime, there was a string of media stories talking about drink spikings. They were investigated and they never found the cause. They tested them for all the usual spiking drugs, etc. It all came back negative. Now, with what we know about the illegal alcohol, the sort of the homemade alcohol being sold without any quality control, it's actually quite likely that they had methanol poisoning or some kind of poisoning from some of the denaturing agents or various other things that are in industrial alcohols that is what's being put into these bottles. So what's happening, for those that don't know, It's the same as what happened with the tobacco excise. The federal government is trying to make money off something that people like, in this case, alcohol. They do it under the justification of public health. We have to pay for all the healthcare that people who drink alcohol need. And so they rack up these massive excise taxes. And what they do, of course, is they create an incentive for any illegal black market operation to supply the market without the taxes. And by its very nature, anyone that's going to play that game isn't going to be too concerned about the quality of the finished product. And so what they're doing is they're distilling alcohol in stills, who knows where, in Australia. And you have to be very careful, as anyone that made moonshine during the Prohibition in the 1920s in the US would know. You have to be very careful when you're distilling. Number one, you can blow yourself up very easily. Number two, the first part of the alcohol that comes out will kill you. You have to be very careful about what you consider to be the drinkable part of each batch. But in fact, they don't care about that. They are literally, in some cases, getting industrial alcohols and just adding them into the mix. What they're doing is they're bottling it up as vodka, and then they're selling it. And what's happening is, you or I mean, you avoid it because you don't drink alcohol. I can avoid ending up with one of those bottles of alcohol by just not buying the $30 bottle of vodka, because obviously they're not paying excise on that, because it's about $30 worth of excise by itself on a bottle of vodka. So maybe don't buy the $30 bottle of vodka, right? That's the advice there.
So is this what's happening? It's going into the cheaper stuff, and is it people are doing it illicitly? So they're putting, like, say, Smirnoff over the top, but it's not actually Smirnoff. Is that what's happening, or are they inventing a different brand?
No. So they're refilling bottles of well-known brands, and they're also just selling it as clean skins. But here's the thing. It's easy for you or I to spot that if we're the one in the bottle shop. But if we're buying our drinks from a club or from a pub, and it's being mixed up as a cocktail, or it's being made as a drink, poured from the bottle that we never see necessarily, we actually have no advanced warning whatsoever of what's really going into that drink. And so these venues, some of which have been essentially bullied by, threats of violence from organized crime into taking them, and some of them have taken them because they just want the cheap booze so they can make more money on their drinks. Whatever the case may be, customers around Victoria right now are being sold drinks that are laced with all kinds of things that are not fit for human consumption. Why? Well, it's happening because the government said we need to tax alcohol for your health, right? So literally, for your health, we're going to tax the alcohol because alcohol's bad for you. That policy is now the reason why quite literally deadly drinks are now being served all over Victoria, and to be honest, all over Australia. But Victoria is where they've actually done the research, and they've verified for a fact. They did a study. Every single postcode inside the greater metropolitan Melbourne area, they were able to find this illegal alcohol available for sale or consumption. Every single postcode within the greater metropolitan Melbourne area.
That's crazy. That's God. And how do you prevent this? Like, because as you said, like if you're at a club or whatever, you don't know.
You get rid of the tax. You change the incentive. This is the thing. People, like, governments love to talk about, enforcement. We're going to have a crackdown. A crackdown is a Band-Aid on an arterial bleed. It's not going to help. It makes you feel a little bit better, makes you feel like you've done something, but it doesn't actually save the patient's life. You need to deal with the arterial bleed. And in the case of this sort of organized crime, that's the incentives. If it weren't for the excise, there wouldn't be an incentive. They wouldn't bother to deal in tobacco if there was no money to be made. If legal tobacco was being sold at its actual market rate, then organized criminals would be like, well, who can be bothered with that? We're out. We're going to go find something more lucrative. Same with the alcohol. So, unfortunately, Tim Pallas, I've got no love for him. He's a former Victorian treasurer.
What's Tim Pallas's role in this? Because he is fairly destructive with all the taxes he introduced during his tenure. So.
Correct. So even he, the point of this is even him, he loves taxes. He loves government power and government control. Even he is saying this organized crime wave and all the violence and the health issues that come with it are caused by the excise, and we cannot fix this problem if we don't overhaul the excise. Now, he doesn't go as far with it as what I would like him to, but we've got to keep in mind, we also saw the New South Wales Premier, was it Chris Minns, a little while ago, a couple of years ago, came out saying we can't fix the tobacco wars unless we fix the tobacco tax. And then all of a sudden went very quiet and kind of backflipped a little bit. Someone got in his ear and said, listen, buddy, you better shut your mouth. But the reality is he was right back then, and he should have kept speaking no matter what was said to him. But neither the government nor the organized crime rings want the status quo to change. Understand it's good for them both. And this is one of the reasons why I say government is just another arm of organized crime. That's what they are. They're an organized crime gang that claim a monopoly on violence and ownership over every single person within their geographical area. And organized crime is just another group that also claims to be able to use violence. That's all it is. It's a group that challenges the government's claim to have a monopoly on violence. That's what we call organized crime. So the government loves this. Number one, they are still making money out of the excise, not nearly as much as they were when the excise was lower. Ironically, the excise has gone up to the wrong side of the Laffer curve. I won't bore you with that explanation again. And now, as it's gone higher, tax revenues have actually declined instead of increasing. Nevertheless, they are still getting $7 billion a year out of the tobacco excise and more money out of the alcohol excise. So they love it from a financial point of view. They also love it because it gives them a problem to promise to fix. And I talk about this all the time. Politicians don't benefit from fixing problems. They benefit from promising to fix problems. And so they've got lots of promises to make because there are so many problems. And thirdly, it gives them an excuse to militarize, to further surveil, to further arm the police and their various sort of branches of government. It gives them an excuse to have a very strict regime at the border, all that stuff that the people in power love to exercise their power. And this gives them a pretext to do it. And of course, the organized crime gangs, they don't want this to stop. They don't want these excises to be terminated, because then they'd have to go and get a real job. So no one involved in this actually wants to change the status quo, not the government and not the organized crime, which means ultimately, until we, the people, change the political incentives and we make this such a big issue that out of self-preservation, politicians have to come on board, until that happens, this continues.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a fun one. Look, how much worse, how long does the crime that we're currently seeing in Victoria have to go on? And how many tragedies do we have to see before we're willing to try something different? This is sort of the thing.
This is kind of where I just get absolutely gobsmacked with it's not even ignorance. They have the stats. They understand it. It has to be ideological because,
Sure.
I mean, we talked about the trans stuff on Monday. I don't want to rehash that argument. But even with the youth crime, we know how bad it is. We know they keep reoffending. And I'm going to bring up a story in a second. It shows you what's going to happen to these young boys if they aren't reprimanded, if there aren't consequences. Yeah. Now, there's still people who will argue with me blue in the face that, Carly, early prevention's better than incarceration. I'm like, yeah, but what do you do when that kid's now got over 400 charges? They've been bailed 51 times. Do you really think youth intervention is going to fix that? That's a hardened criminal. That's a hardened criminal. Whether or not you want to believe that at 14 you can be. Yeah. And did we talk about this on Monday? The 14-year-old girl who got let off because she didn't understand. She was too young to understand right from wrong.
Dolly Incapax, yes. We didn't talk about it, no.
All right, let's pull that up first, because I think this is girl. Was it young teenager acquitted for being too young to understand? Right.
Yeah. So Dolly Incapax applies to anyone in Australia charged under criminal law who is under the age of 14, and I believe it can be extended further if they can argue intellectual maturity or various other things.
All right, so let me pull this up. I'll come back to this story in a second, but here we go. Okay, so naturally, Jacinta Allen has dodged questions about it. So 100 charges against a teen were dropped. This is in Victoria. Of course, it's in Victoria. Because Jacinta Allen.
Put it on screen?
Oh, sorry.
Can you put it on screen?
My bad, sorry. Jacinta Allen has dodged questions about thresholds for criminal responsibility in young people after a 14-year-old girl had more than 100 charges against her dropped. The 14-year-old girl was facing 109 charges for an alleged 2-month spree of incidents, including some alleged anti-Semitic attacks. She was denied bail in April due to the severity of her allegations. And police today withdrew the charges after the prosecution was able to reach the Dolly Incapax.
It was unable to reach the Dolly Incapax legal threshold. So in other words, Dolly Incapax is an argument that says, I am not mature enough to be able to be criminally liable for anything. Obviously Yeah.
It's really fascinating in a state like Victoria, who will also argue that a 3-year-old understands the difference between their genders and can switch and tell you verbatim that they identify as the opposite gender to that which they were born with. So I just find it really confusing how a 3-year-old can determine their sex before they are even understanding what sexual relations are, but they don't at 14 understand that what they're doing, i.e. break into people's homes, stealing cars, almost trying to kill a cyclist. And they knocked him over whilst they were driving past. He was in intensive care for weeks. That they couldn't possibly. How could they have known, Topher? How could they have possibly known?
You can't expect them to know that that's a bad thing to do. Keep going, but I want to tie this in with something that I did a video about this week.
Yeah, so this is this story, right? But I mean, also, side note, I keep saying this. I'm not one for the old ad hominem, but Jacinta Allen's hairdresser hates her. I'm just saying it. They hate her freaking mullet Lord Farquhar cut is pretty outrageous. I don't apologize. Okay, so now I need to pull up this story. So you should be able to see that.
Let me segue through this story. Let me add that. Hang on. I'm going to remove yours. I'm going to add mine. Did I talk about this on the show already?
This is where but I watched the video on this.
Yeah, so the Australian Federal Police groomed a 13-year-old, actively reached out to him and groomed him. He is diagnosed autistic with an IQ of 71. So we're not talking like a soft autism diagnosis. This is at reaching the levels of a genuine intellectual disability at an IQ of 71. And the Australian Federal Police groomed him, and I mean that quite literally. And it's not just my opinion. It's actually the court that have said. So if we go down to here, the now 18-year-old, who's known by the court pseudonym Thomas Carrick, was first charged with terrorism offences in 2021, but the case was thrown out after a magistrate found that the Australian Federal Police had groomed him and encouraged his fixation on ISIS. Now, that charge was brought against him when he was 14 years of age for offences that he committed when he was 13. The Australian Federal Police deliberately waited to bring charges until after his 14th birthday to try and stop him from being able to use the Dolly Incapax argument, to try and actually neuter that. And so this is a case here where the Dolly Incapax threshold was very high on the mind of the Australian Federal Police. And they made sure to avoid that so that they could prosecute as an adult, well, not as an adult, but so they could properly criminally prosecute a intellectually disabled child. That's how much they care about our safety, guys. They're going after all of the potential terrorists, including the ones they made. Anyway, back to your story.
This is what I mean about it has to be ideological at this point, because none of this is grounded in common sense or logic. None of it. And so this next story that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to explain this, is I often get accused of being heartless, particularly when it comes to these youth criminals. It's easy to argue for them when you're not a victim of them. When you become a victim of them, you just get outraged that this was allowed to happen. But so this happened the other day. So we've talked about these teenagers stealing cars, joyriding, and my worst fear is that they kill someone else, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about on this podcast over the last couple of years of some of these kids actually killing themselves. Some of them drove into a tree. There was that horrible scenario where there was 4 of them in the car and they all died. So there's been a lot of these. These aren't abnormalities.
We saw 2 girls die not far from where I live by deliberately, it would appear, going onto the wrong side of the Hume Freeway and just driving down the wrong side of the freeway as fast as they possibly could until the obvious happened.
And you have to wonder, are these kids drunk? I mean, I understand that when you're a teenager, you have this idea that you're immortal, for sure. I understand that's part of it. Is it social media clout? I think there's a whole host of things that sort of come together to create this environment for these kids, but they're fucking bored. That's the answer. They're bored. There's nothing for them to do.
I think you're being generous to put it down to that.
I'll give you a couple of examples, right? We know what teenagers are like. We've all been teenagers, and we've all done things that, push the boundaries and things like that. For me, I had so much angst. I didn't know where to channel it. And I guess that's, hormones. It might have been that I didn't fit in at school, a whole host of reasons. But that angst, it needed an outlet. and I didn't
Sure.
have it, and I think that's the case for a lot of boys. They have so much built up testosterone when they're a teenager, and some of them go into skate parks, others steal cars. And I think about all the boys when I was a teenager and the ones who were the naughty ones, and a lot of it was when they were able to do their motocross, when they were able to go and play hockey, or when they were able to do like contact sports or whatever, they could channel it. They were awesome. We don't allow a lot of that now. We've de-incentivized winning, so you can't win. So you don't get that massive boost of self-esteem because, everyone gets a participation ribbon. We've given people gaming consoles and we've just banned them from social media. So it's like at one turn you give them something and then you take it away at another. Kids can't go and ride their bike without a helmet. I understand why, but when you put all these extra things in there, it just makes the friction becomes unbearable and it's no longer fun. And there has to be an element of risk for a teenager to be excited by it.
I agree with all of that, but there is another very important part of it, which is training a child. And life has consequences. Driving down the wrong side of the highway at high speed has very real consequences for you and potentially for other people. If we allow kids to grow up without consequences for small things, then they delude themselves into believing that there won't be consequences for big things.
That was
this is where discipline comes in. Yeah, this is where discipline comes in. So I agree. We need to actually reward and allow those that want to. Not everyone does, but anyone that wants to should be allowed to take some risks, should be allowed to be competitive, to get hurt, to potentially accidentally hurt others in the process. Hey, for those that are really full on, get into combat sports. Go for it, right? I'm all in favor of all of that. But there's also a reality that far too many parents now are actually not allowed to pull their kids back into line. And I'm going to go back to that story about Thomas Carrick, the one that I showed you, where the Australian Federal Police basically entrapped him so that they could charge him as a terrorist. He was first discovered to be looking at ISIS-related material on a school computer. That's how it first came to light. And the police said, we're not going to do anything. Or the federal police said, we're not going to do anything. The state police put him on an intervention, a diversionary program. Then his own father discovered that he was using the family computer to look at stuff and was hiding it from the family. He then went back to the Australian Federal Police. And according to court documents, he said, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have the quote in front of me. He basically said, I'm willing to sacrifice my son for the sake of the wider community. Can you please do something about this? Because this is a problem, right? So here we have a situation where even parents that are actually going to the authorities saying, my son might be on a pathway towards actual terrorism. What's the result? Well, it's not what it should have been. That's for sure. And parents who discipline their kids, parents who introduce artificial consequences, sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes, if my kid runs across the road, I live on a quiet street. If my kid runs across the road without looking, he can probably do that 499 times without consequences. And it's not going to be until the 500th that he gets hit by a car and is killed, or he causes someone to swerve off the road and they get hurt, right? And so it's very difficult. Children, developing brains, it's consequences that are infrequent feel too abstract. They're not real to that person, to that mind. You have to introduce consequences that are real and immediate. So things like, yes, okay, go to your room, you can't use computers, no screens for a while, all that stuff, fine. But if a kid is just persistent, I'm sorry, there comes a point where they actually need a sting. Now, civilization has known this for thousands of years. We've known this. It's only in literally the last 30, 40 years that we've suddenly gone, oh, no. Corporal punishment, physical discipline has no place. Well, I agree it shouldn't be the first thing. It shouldn't even be the second or third thing, but it has a place. It has to have a place.
I would agree with that. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And that was, I was going to say, like, that's part of it. I mean, part of it is also allowing the kids to have a little bit of rope. I'll give you an example. Like, we grew up in a cul-de-sac and it was, it had quite an incline. And when you're a kid, that incline feels massive. So when you're on a bike or your rollerblades or a billy cart, it feels like you're flying down a hill.
Yeah.
And there was a group of us. There was maybe like 9 or 10 kids that would just take it in turns playing with each other. And most Saturdays we were all out together. Just, I don't know, like I think I've told this story before. We found a table in someone's garage that had casters on it. And like we sat on the table and flew down this hill. I cannot tell you. Dude, I cannot tell you how many grazes I got down the side of my thighs. I always had holes in my knees of my pants. And my mum used to get so worked up about it because she'd go out and buy me, like, it was the 90s. It'd be like leggings and a matching jumper. And all my leggings had holes in them. And she'd just get so mad. And my dad would say, then just buy her things that she can wear for that and keep her nice things for later. And she's like, no, I want it to look nice. He's like, well, she's gonna do it. And, part of it was also I had an older brother, so I wanted to play with my older brother and his friends.
Yeah.
But, there was moments where our parents were like, you're going to hurt yourself. They told us. We knew. And I did this spectacular little stunt. And I had been warned. My parents had told me all the things. Don't do it. Don't do it. I did it anyway. And there was the street behind us had a much higher incline. And they were building – it was a new housing development. So at any given time, there were so many new houses always being built. And we found this house that had a really steep driveway and they just put the slate in. And I was like,
okay,
perfect. Strapped on my rollerblades. And of course, when you're young, you have no fear, right? Strapped on my rollerblades. And I was so cool. I'd actually taken the brakes off my rollerblades because they were very cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no.
So you know where this is going. So I stand on the top of that driveway.
The emergency room?
Pretty much, yeah.
Straight to the scene of the accident? That's where it's going.
I went full send, and it started from this steep driveway down a slate driveway, by the way, all the way down on the road, and the road had a curve in it, and I'm flying. And look, I don't know what I'm doing, like 30, 40 Ks an hour. I don't fucking know. I can't remember.
Which might as well be 1,000 Ks an hour on a set of rollerblades.
There was no avenue for me to stop. Now, remember, this is a building place. So in the middle of the bitumen was a friggin' screw that I went over. And then I got the speed wobbles and then it was all over. And I slid about 20 meters on the side of my leg. And I got a graze from my hip bone to my ankle bone. And basically half the top layer of skin was missing. And boy, did that hurt.
That'll hurt.
But what was even better is I got up and everyone's looking at my leg because that's where the blood is. And everyone's like, oh my God, freaking out. And we had to walk back. And I had to do the walk of shame because I knew exactly what my mother was going to say to me. Anyway, and I'm walking with the rollerblades still strapped on, by the way, and we're walking through the paddock, and I'm like, oh, my arm really hurts. And everyone's like, your leg is pissing out blood. Anyway, we get to my mum. She's in the garden. She looks up. She looks at my leg, and she's like, I told you that was going to happen. Go clean yourself up. And I'm like, like zero bedside manner.
Classic. None. Yeah.
And I'm like, Mum, it really hurts. And she's like, I bet it does. I bet it hurts a lot, which is why I told you not to do it. So anyway, I go inside.
I can hear my voice to my own kids.
As a parent, you're like,
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm in my mum's bathroom because she had a bath. And so I'm in there and it's red raw. I'm missing half the skin and it's really bad. And I realize it's really bad and I'm pulling all the bitumen out. And you know what it's like when you got an open wound, it really hurts to put anything on it. My mum walks in and she takes one look at my arm because I said, oh, my arm's hurting. And she's like, that's your bone sticking out, isn't it? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, that's it's not meant to look that way. And she's like, right. And my mum's pissed because she had a whole day of gardening to do. Anyway,
no, that's right. She was going to watch reruns of Days of Our Lives.
We get in the car, we go to the local hospital. Sure enough, I've snapped my radius clean in half. And it's the first of many wrist breaks in my life. And the doctor's looking at me and he's like, well, I guess you're not going to do that again. And yeah, I didn't. And but you know, all those warnings, I was going to do it. I learnt the hard way. I broke my arm and, or broke my wrist and I was missing half the skin. What was worse is for a good month, whilst that skin was healing, I had a reminder that, don't do that again. And guess what? I did it. Yeah. And so the problem is you have a lot of helicopter parenting, right? Like, oh, no, don't let the cotton wool parents. And I understand you want to protect your kids, but there is an element of let them burn their hand on the stove. Like you don't want them to get seriously hurt, but they're gonna do it. I'm telling you, we all did it. You're all going to have the smoke behind the shed. You're all going to get blackout drunk once at a party. You're all going to do something stupid. The point is you've got to let kids learn at the smaller examples so they don't take the risk and steal the car and learn the ultimate way, right?
Yeah. So little story about my son. We moved up here. There's beautiful mountain biking trails and so forth around Albury. And so I bought myself a mountain bike and I bought my son a mountain bike. We used to sort of meet up with friends and ride and we'd go riding. We'd try to go out a couple of times a week when the weather was good. And the fire trails, there's some long downhills and there's some long uphills. And of course, when it rains, the water runs down. And so they put these sort of mounds into the fire trails to cause the water to run off the side of the track so it doesn't just run down the track and gouge all the stones and everything. And what does my son see when he sees these as we're hooking downhill at quite high speed? He sees jumps. And so I'm going along at a speed where I can control, my front wheel will come off, but I'm keeping my back wheel on the ground as I sort of lift the front wheel over them and then come back down. My son is going for a world record, longest possible jumps, and he's going a good 50% faster than me and deliberately trying to jump these things as fast as he can. And in that moment, and this is, he's done this over multiple downhills, and then we have to do the drudgery of the climb back out the other side. And then, so I've watched him do this. And on this ride where he's getting more and more confidence and he's going harder and harder at it and he's landing hard, and I'm watching him, he's always in front of me at this point because he's going faster. And I'm watching him land and have a momentary wobble with the front steering, but then he stabilizes and I have to make a decision as a parent. What do I do? Now I've told him, be careful. I've told him that stuff, but I know exactly what's going on in his mind. Dad doesn't understand how good I am. That's what's going on in his mind. And I know that. I know that because that's what I thought when I was his age too. And so I just went, okay, he has to have a crash at this point. Like, whatever form this takes, whether it's a trip to hospital with a broken bone, God forbid something even worse, or something relatively minor that just scares him, he has to have a crash. And so I'm not going to tell him to slow down. I'm going to let him live with this delusion and this confidence, and I'm going to let him experience the natural consequences. Well, it was only a couple of rides later, we were going down a really treacherous section where not only is it very, very steep down, but it's super rocky. And so the bike is trying to skip and jump and bump. And if you get your brakes wrong, you're going to be on your face before you know it. And he came into it a little bit too quick. And then when he realized he was going too quick, he tried to get on the brakes, but the bike was actually standing on its nose wheel and he had no rear braking at all. And so he lost his directional stability now as well. And like it was a moment. And the track then does a switchback. And of course, there's no way he's making that. So he goes straight off. And I watched him. He slams into a tree that has a Y. It was almost comical. He slams, the bike hits the tree. He goes through the Y.
Legs dangling.
And no. And he just disappears out of sight because that's a drop off. That's an embankment at that point. And I was a reasonable way back from him, and I knew that I couldn't hurry down to him or I would end up suffering the same fate. So I had to regulate my emotions in that moment and not get carried away. And so literally I was counting in my head the seconds before he started screaming and just hoping that I would hear him start screaming. Because if he's screaming, he's conscious. Yeah. Right. And that means your worst case scenario is out of your head. He's not dead. Right. And it took me, I don't know, it was probably all of 10, 15 seconds to get down to him and get around to where he was. And he'd basically gone through the Y in this tree and then fallen genuinely another 2 to 3 meters. It was higher than my head height that he would have just clean fallen onto the ground, slammed into the ground. He'd cut his face and grazed up his shoulders and done himself a fair bit of superficial damage. And I sort of quickly checked him over and there were no broken bones. Amazingly, his collarbone, because a lot of the impact was on the back of one of his shoulders and somehow his collarbone survived. And so we just walked the rest of the way home. I wheeled both of our bikes. And he walked along beside me and it was a fairly quiet walk. And he learnt more in that moment than he would ever have learnt from me telling him anything.
Yeah. The precautionary tales don't work. They kind of need to have a little taste of it. And you don't want them to get genuinely hurt. Of course, I'm not advocating for that. Just enough to make you go, ooh.
Yeah, and there was no need for an I told you so speech. There was no need for any of that. Physics, the laws of physics had done their job and he'd experienced the consequences in that case. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why we have to let kids take risks. Helicopter parents are depriving their kids of that feedback mechanism, that loop. And if they don't get that feedback younger, then they believe they're invincible later. And that leads to the sort of stuff we're talking about.
I agree with you. And I'm going to go one layer. And before everyone jumps up at me, please remember, like, I have been a kid. I have been in these shoes and I understand. And I was a bit of an alien at school and I got bullied a lot. But I understand we don't want prolific bullying. And I understand now with social media, it can be even worse. but there is an element of bullying that is needed for social cohesion. And I don't mean in the point where, you know, girls gang up on girls, and we know that horrific story about Dolly and all that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your normal interactions in the playground when you're a bit younger. And Sally said this, and, oh, you're dobbing on me. Like, parents get involved.
Can I suggest that the word teasing might be the more fitting word rather than bullying for what you're describing?
Yeah, maybe teasing. Yeah, maybe it's the wrong word. It becomes bullying, I think, when you're a little bit older. But, you know, parents get so involved in that stuff. I'm like, you've just got to let them sort it out. It's a bit of a pecking order kind of thing, right? Yeah. And yeah, it's not nice. But there's an element of resilience that gets built in those things. So it's a bit of a character build. And if they don't learn it then, it does escalate into things like big bullying and stuff like that. And people don't have, or they don't develop the skills for conflict or how to be more assertive. And I remember going through
office politics. You know, the childhood behavior continues into adult life.
I'll give you an example, because this happens a lot on my Instagram. I get DMs all the time of people going, I wish I had your confidence. You're so assertive. I'm like, dude, I didn't have this. I was a doormat and I was bullied like hell in school. Let me tell you, this is a learned thing. I can't teach it to you. This is a level of resilience that comes after like having been picked on a lot. And like, you know, there's a whole host of things I was picked on for. None of it which was fair. But, you know, I grew up in Japan, so I was a bit of an alien. I had a weird looking face. I'd been in an accident, you know. I had all these different things. Like, you know, I had a bit of an American accent. And you know, I grew up in Japan. Like, these were all weird, stupid things that I got picked on for. And none of it made sense. And then add to that, you know, the teenage girls. God, you want to talk about bullying. Oh, being a teenage girl. Right. Yeah. And a lot of it's a coming of age thing. And I'm not saying it's right, but I do think part of it is innate. It's a little bit of like that friction and resistance actually helps you start to develop your character. And I didn't necessarily learn it as a teenager. It just sort of set me up. When I went to uni, that was my first time of like, you know, I'm able to reinvent who I am, right? Because at uni, no one knew who I was.
No one knew you. Yeah.
And so, you know, you learn that, and then you have those new dynamics. And as you said, like in your first office or like your first workplace, you get all that sort of stuff. And then obviously add to that social media, putting yourself out there. It's not comfortable. Friction's not comfortable. And like being attacked or being bullied is not comfortable. But how else do you learn it? There's nothing I can do to teach someone who lacks self-confidence to teach them confidence. I can't do it. It's something that you have to learn. And I think with a lot of this modern parenting, helicopter parenting, and all of these different, what do you call them, like programs they put into schools to try and deter natural human behavior at the smaller side of the scale, it actually makes it way worse. So by interrupting it all in the very small formative years, it now escalates because they haven't built those skills. So when they are bullied, it does become like gargantuan in their mind, and it can lead to way worse consequences. Does that make sense?
And well, it does, but let me add a layer of clarification, because there might be some people thinking, well, hang on, that sounds like a contradiction. You were saying a minute ago there have to be consequences, and now you're saying the parents shouldn't get involved. It's like, no. The consequences don't always have to come from parents. In fact, it's better when they don't. It's better when they experience natural consequences. But parents need to intervene when natural consequences aren't so visible. That's why I gave the example of running across the street. We live in a quiet street. He'd get away with that hundreds of times before something really went wrong. He's not going to experience natural consequences, and the natural consequences could be far too severe for me as a loving parent to want him to experience those. I don't want him to learn the lesson that way. That's different to falling off a mountain bike. That's different to you know, falling off your rollerblades. Like that's potentially deadly.
That's a good distinction. What I meant is parents intervening to prevent any consequence, whether from them or from the situation.
That's exactly right. And so this is the thing. Kids need to learn how to stand up to themselves. And sometimes that means that they become the consequence against the other kid that is bullying them. Yeah. I'm not against, like, I'm sorry, violence has a place in our society, and a punch in the nose is sometimes a valid response. Rarely, it should certainly not be your first port of call, but sometimes, And there is time and time again throughout, you know, society. And one of the mistakes that we make now is someone is being provocative and someone is pushing another person, is bullying another person, but because the other person is the one that throws the first punch, we assume that they're the problem and we come down on them. We reward the bullying behavior because we've kind of got this red line, it should never get to violence. Well, it should rarely get to violence. But,
I've got
there are circumstances.
I'll give you a little funny scenario and then I'll show you this story again. But my brother's 5 years older than me and he's 6'4", right? Like he's a massive human. And brother-sister relationship, right? Like just we are chalk and cheese. We are at very different ends of the spectrum. Could not be more unalike. And God, we fought. We fought like cats and dogs. And he was older than me. He was the bigger brother. And like he just picked on me. And it was one of those things like, Mum, I would, I'd dob on him all the time. Like, Mum, David's doing this to me. And she'd be like, sort it out yourselves. Sort it out yourselves.
Yep.
And, there'd be moments where, we'd be wrestling and we're not like play wrestling. We're like wrestling for death, right? And I'm like this little pipsqueak and he's, 6'4". And so there was moments like, well, I think it was like under puberty when I was like still little, my brother would just absolutely pants me. And then I was about maybe 14 or 15. I can't remember, somewhere around there. And one day I was like, I'm fucking done with this. I'm standing up to you. And what I did is I grabbed a roll of duct tape and I just, with the aim of fucking Hercules or someone, I just piffed it at him as hard as I possibly could. And it smacked him right in the temple, knocked him clean out.
Yeah,
like he literally fell to the ground unconscious. I think I've told this story before. I thought I killed him.
Did you think he killed him? Yeah.
I thought I killed him. We went down like a ton of shit. And he was on the ground, and that's when I'm like, oh no, oh shit, ran over to him.
I did not understand my powers.
I was like, I'm looking at my right arm going, and sure enough, he comes to, and it was just this moment, this look in his face, like, respect. All right, guess what? He didn't pick on me like he used to. There was a level of, all right, my work here is done. I've taught my little sister how to stand up for herself. And it's one of those things. And I felt like I was 10 foot tall that day. I was just like, I'm not saying we should get to that point, but there's an element of that. I mean, they're funny stories now, but, you kind of got to let them do it. But I want to bring it back to this story. Okay, so I've actually told the story of this teenager, and obviously with the nature of the news, I don't know their names because they're used and I can't tell you who they are specifically. But there's been a couple of stories we've mentioned on this podcast about a youth that has over 50 bail, has been bailed 50 times, over 400 charges. And this story popped up. Is it showing? Oh, there we go. So heartbroken mother pleas to young criminals after her 14-year-old dies in a stolen car crash. Now, I don't know which 14-year-old this was, but it's someone that has been known to police and has multiple charges against them. And finally, the inevitable has happened. He's killed himself and almost killed 2 other people in the car. So I'm just going to read this story because, as always with these stories, they were good boys. They were great kids.
Oh, yeah, of course they were. Yeah. Perfect little angels. This is the first time they ever stepped out of line.
Right. So I might play the video. Let's just play the video.
The mother doesn't want her son's death.
Sorry. It's going to play from the start. No.
Apologies. I've got to keep an eye on my phone because I might get a call from Pauline at any moment. So I do apologize. I'm not ignoring you.
All right. If this will play for me.
When high school meets high fashion.
Oh, God. Excuse me. Just mute it. La. Sorry, guys. 1 minute.
The trouble people go to get eyeballs.
Indeed.
It is amazing.
And I love how we just mute them. We're like, yeah, I'm not even paying attention.
Yeah.
Good evening. A heartbroken family has issued a sobering plea to young criminals after a 14-year-old boy was killed in a stolen car crash on the Calder Highway.
The mother doesn't want her son's death to be in vain as her 2 nephews face the fight of their lives.
3 cousins, 3 best friends, these boys did everything together. Yesterday was no different before one decision in a stolen car had devastating consequences.
Yes,
our boys, they are loving boys. Yeah, they made the wrong choice, but people shouldn't go judging them.
18-year-old Dougie Sullivan, his little brother DeAndre Hayes, and their cousin Conroy Clark were all inside this stolen Hilux which crashed yesterday on the Calder Highway. Police have now revealed the car was stolen from a hotel in Mildura on Friday night and 7 hours later involved in a fuel drive-off. Then, just before 10 a.m, more than 300 kilometres away, the ute veered off the road and into a tree. Dougie and DeAndre were both critically injured. Conroy, just 14, died at the scene.
He was fun, loving, outgoing, a good-spirited kid.
But he's had previous run-ins with the law.
We've tried so hard to keep Conroy on a straight and narrow and to keep him out of trouble. If people actually knew these boys' story and what they went through growing up, you know, they would understand.
Make that investment in early intervention so we don't see 14-year-old boys.
Don't really care, Jess Wilson.
Yeah. So I've made enemies saying this before, but I'm going to say it again. If you have a youth in your life who is heading in this sort of a direction, do them a favor, get around with their dad if the dad's around, get their uncles, get any other men that actually care and actually give a flying fuck about this kid, lock him in a shed with all of you and beat the ever-loving shit out of them until you break that rebellious will, that rebellious spirit that is causing them to take risks with their own life and other people's. If you love them, you will do whatever it takes to change the course of their future. If you hate them, be nice to them, be loving, be tolerant. And then you will wake up one day to a phone call that tells you that they've killed themselves or they've killed somebody else because of their reckless behavior. You know, to have the reporter there say, oh, because of one decision. No, that's not one decision. That's a string of decisions taken over years and years and years. That's multiple decisions just in relation to that one stolen vehicle. The decision to steal the vehicle, the decision to steal the fuel that got them the 300 kilometers to the point of that boy's death. The decision to drive recklessly, to speed, whatever else he was doing. I mean, you don't get a car mangled that badly at low speeds, that's for sure. Right? There's a string of decisions here. The problem is he's gotten away with those decisions in the past. He hasn't experienced the full consequences.
Well,
and
worse
that's
than
what
that,
killed him.
It's a bloody escalation. Like, these kids would have started with like petty shoplifting or like, you know, picking on someone. And then it gets to a point where they're back chatting and they don't really care about their parents. Like, no, I'm sorry. At 14, you understand how to drive a vehicle to fill it up with petrol so that you can drive 300 kilometers away. Like, that's
we don't know who the driver was. So there was an 18-year-old amongst those three. We don't know which one was the driver.
No, it's the 14-year-old that was driving. He's the one in the passenger seat who killed himself. Yeah, the driver killed himself. He was 14. That's in the story.
All right.
So I'm sorry. At 14, you understand enough of that. Your parents should have like picked this up when you were 10 and you were petty shoplifting, or when you were like picking on people, or where you were talking back to your parents. And this is a consequence. At 14, to have that much confidence and gall to go out and do that. Are you joking? At 14, I can tell you now, I was scared to even say like shit in front of my father. I was terrified. And as much as like, I'm not saying my parents were perfect, you know, there's definitely moments where my parents got things wrong, but I understood that my dad would whoop my ass black and blue if he thought it were appropriate. And I did. I copped it a couple of times in my life where, Jesus, like, you know, I these days, my parents would be locked up for what they used to do to me. But back then, it was like, you are going to learn this lesson and you are going to learn it hard. These kids, and I know you can't do that to your kids now. I know you're not even allowed to smack your kids now. These kids are dead because their parents, A, weren't able to do their job, or B, didn't do the job. It's a consequence of that. I'm sorry.
And whatever the particular circumstances in their individual case, this happens multiple times every single year. And part of the blame has to be laid at the feet of a state that has criminalized parents doing what it takes to actually love their kids, to actually guide their kids, to actually correct their kids and bring them back onto the straight and narrow when they have ever so clearly strayed. And again, for those that are going to want to hate on me, this isn't the first port of call. But it should sure as hell happen before your kid is stealing cars and driving at high speed. Like, if there's a progression, and I would argue that a violent intervention needs to happen before your kid gets to that point. And if it hasn't happened, I'm sorry, it ends up like this.
Well, it gets worse, right? So, I mean, in this case, the boys took themselves out. And I mean, a death is always sad, but at the same time, I'm grateful it was him as opposed to someone.
And not. Yeah.
And how many of those stories have we seen over the recent years of, you know, a grandfather who was just driving home from work, or a school teacher who was just on their way to work, who gets killed by one of these people? I could pull up about 50 stories right now. So I'm grateful for once it's the offender, or it's the criminal, or it's the kid who's doing the reckless driving. But now, because of this bullshit, we all get punished, right? So this has come out of Victoria today. Aussie drivers will be forced to slow down to 30 kilometers in zones rolled out because it feels calmer. I mean, traffic's already prolific in this state, but now Jacinta Allen's answer to the road toll is to make everyone else crawl, because she will do anything but lock up these criminal kids. She'll do anything but deal with the actual problem. She'll just make the rest of the state suffer.
Did they just admit that they are doing speed limit rules based on the vibe of the thing? It feels calmer. It must be right because it feels good.
So they're trialing this. I think they started trialing this out in Fitzroy. I think this was like along Brunswick Street and places like that. Which, to be honest, they already have tram lines. Like they already have their traffic prevent.
We're already going slow enough. Yeah.
Right. Like you get stuck behind one of those bloody trams, you're going 20 Ks the whole way. Okay, so in Victoria, the Allen government has backed, of course it's the Allen government, $28.7 million package to cut speed limits across the state. It includes $331,000 in funding for the Stonington Council to slash speeds across parts of Melbourne's iconic Chapel Street, along with nearby Wirt Street, I don't know how you say that, and Osborne Avenue under its Safe Local Roads and Street program. I'm sorry, every time the government says safe, a little part of me gets a chill down my spine. This move forms part of a much wider rollout. And here it says, Dr. Johnson, who is Australasian College of Road Safety Chief Executive, Dr. Ingrid Johnson, this week talks about speed limits across the country and argues that reductions are needed nationwide on both urban and regional roads. Everyone's grown up looking at those signs of 100, even in built-up areas, looking at signs of 50, and then being told that's safe when it's actually not. Fucking spare me, Ingrid.
When they first brought in the 50-kilometre-an-hour zones, I went on the record saying, where does this logic stop? It doesn't.
Why does she look like expected? Why do they always look the same? Always. I'm from the government and I'm here for your safety, right? Like, isn't it that a Churchill quote? Or no, who was it? Eisenhower.
No. It was. Oh, gosh, his name will come to me in a second. The former actor who became a US president, Ronald Reagan. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. They're the 9 most frightening words in the English language.
But I mean, this is just ludicrous. You know, like, talk about infantilizing people. Like, oh, we're from the government. We're going to slow it down because you little people don't know how to do it for yourself. So mommy and daddy government are going to do it for you. Oh.
Can I really, 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 really get myself in trouble now?
Oh, is it going to piss me off even more?
Probably not, but it's going to piss some people off. No, put it back on screen. Put it back on screen. Yeah.
Okay.
This is vandalism.
Okay.
And I mean that literally. This is vandalism. Think about what vandalism is. Vandalism is when you deface or destroy or in some way harm a thing that belongs to somebody else, and it deprives them of their enjoyment of it. It means that they don't get as much use out of it. Maybe you're only actually defacing it cosmetically, but vandalism is when you go in and you make a choice to make something that belongs to somebody else worse. Right? And you might think it's better. Oh, it looks better with my tag on the side of that fence. Doesn't matter. That's still vandalism. When the government comes along and begins to deprive the tax-paying public who own everything, let's not forget, nothing is owned by the government, everything is owned by the taxpayers. When they damage our use of it, when they make it worse for us, that is vandalism. Now, I want to show you, and this is where some people get really, really pissed off. I want to show you the logical conclusion of this, because in the UK, they're not putting in 30-kilometre-an-hour speed limits. They're putting up camera systems everywhere called ultra-low emissions zone cameras. This is Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London's idea. That was a photo that I grabbed obviously too quickly because it's obviously a ruined camera in that particular case. I don't know that I want to stop and try and find another one, but you get what I'm talking about. These ULEZ
this is
cameras.
The Blade Runners thing, right?
The Blade Runners. Now, The Blade Runners are being told that they are the vandals because they're vandalizing government property. They're cutting down poles, they're destroying cameras, they're cutting wires, they're stopping these cameras from functioning. And yes, that does meet the technical definition of vandalism. But if that's vandalism, then so is depriving the people who paid for those roads of the use of those roads, which is what the ultra low emissions zones do. It says, I don't care that you helped pay. I don't care that you're a ratepayer. I don't care that I'm your servant and you're actually the master and all of this belongs to you in the first place, unless you comply with my petty conditions, which, by the way, favor rich people over poor people. Unless you do it exactly the way that I tell you, you're not allowed to use the road that you paid for, the thing that you own that belongs to you. Yeah. That's vandalism. The Sadiq Khan's City of London is committing acts of vandalism against the people of the UK by damaging their use of something that belongs to them. So in my view,
part of the reason we need civil disobedience, right?
Correct. Correct.
This is how you push back.
Correct. So the Blade Runners, in my view, are right on the bleeding edge of genuine civil disobedience, right? And the reason why I still think they are within the boundaries of civil disobedience is because what they are damaging is explicitly the infrastructure that the government has put in place in order to vandalize the actual public property, which is the roads, right? They're not smashing windows. They're not cutting down everything else. They're not removing traffic lights and blah, blah. No. They are targeting explicitly the infrastructure that the government is putting in place in order for the government to vandalize public property by the proper definition of the word vandal, by the proper understanding of what a vandal is and does. They are destroying and depriving the rightful owners of their use and enjoyment of the roads that they paid for. So I consider the Blade Runners to be right on the bleeding edge of valid civil disobedience. I mean, they're right on that edge. And I've no doubt that if someone was to do investigative journalism, they'd find a few that have probably crossed that line. There's probably been some instances where people have. But cutting down that infrastructure, removing those poles, removing those cameras, blinding the government in its efforts to vandalize public property is valid civil disobedience. And this situation that we've got now where they're turning around and saying, you paid for the roads, you paid your taxes on a certain deal. We're changing the deal now. We're going to rewrite the rules. And if you don't follow our rules, we're going to hurt you. We're going to punish you. We are going to decrease the usefulness of the asset that you helped to pay for, the thing that belongs to you. That is a soft form of vandalism. And just because it's the government doing it doesn't mean that it's not vandalism.
Okay, I've got a couple of stories here. I'm just going to change pace, but I want to bring this up. I just got this message on Instagram from Bradley.
Just a word of warning. We need to finish relatively soon because, of course, this episode will have started with an extended interview, a sit-down chat with Senator Pauline Hanson.
But it has not yet happened.
I'm still waiting on a text message to confirm that we're actually going to get that. But we have to record this part in faith and hope that is actually going to take place.
Okay, so we'll do some quick fire stories.
Right, rapid fire stories. Yep.
So this came from Bradley. I won't say your last name just in case you don't want everyone to know that you sent me this message, Bradley. But he said, been listening to the podcast, and in light of a few things that you brought up in your recent episode, I just wanted to bring your attention to something that's actually pretty infuriating. My wife is a teacher, and as you know, in Victoria, they are currently going through their agreement negotiations for the pay rise. She found out yesterday that under the agreement, teachers looking to undergo gender-affirming surgeries, teachers, would be given up to 20 days of paid leave to do so. Whereas for the reproductive surgeries like IVF or, for example, laparoscopy, I'm sorry if I said that wrong,
I don't know what that is, sorry.
That requires 4 to 6 weeks recovery. They are only afforded 5 days. Pretty backwards if you ask me, but with this, do with this what you will. So,
yeah, it's amazing,
and he has written, please keep this anonymous. So I've just said Bradley. Oh, I hope that hasn't thrown him under the bus. Bradley Smith Brown from somewhere.
I mean, Bradlette, the voluptuous woman who is in no way
I've assumed Brad's gender. Brad could be a woman.
That's true.
And have a wife. I mean,
it could be a hyphenated name, Bradley, Leigh. Yeah.
Yeah. To be fair, I've fucked this right up.
Monumentally.
Yeah.
But this is the thing that we've entered the phase of rubbing it in our faces.
100%.
We've gone so far past efforts towards equality. Not that I even agree with that necessarily. But for a long time we were told this is just about equality. This is just about us being on the same level. No, it never was. And we can now prove it because we've gone well past any sense of equality, any sense of balancing out the ledgers. We're now deep into rub it in our faces type of territory. Now, people get cross with me when I talk about how we worship government and it's become theological. People get cross with me when I talk about that. But honestly, when an invading army takes over your town, what do? They put their flags up everywhere. We see this throughout history. The history of war, once you conquer, you put your flag at the top of the highest point. You put your flag all the way down the main street. What flags do we see all over this country? Okay. All right. So hold that thought. When you have conquered, what do you do to the people that you've conquered, and particularly to their heroes? You humiliate them. You parade through the streets of Rome with their general, with their captain, with their chieftain, whomever it is, in chains behind you, trudging along, walking behind your glorious looking chariot. Why? It's a humiliation ritual.
Yeah.
It's making a statement. And we've entered the phase now where we have been occupied by an ideology that I do not believe is compatible with genuine Western values, with principles like human rights, like equality before the law. These principles are anathema to the occupying force. We see their flags everywhere, and they are looking for every opportunity to put us through humiliation rituals. And I would tie in what's happened recently in the Giggle versus Tickle case, where the appeal was thrown out and it's now going to have to go to the High Court. All of this is part of that. The humiliation of all that came before is the point. Equality is not.
I agree. All right, next story. This one's actually from Avi. So we had a contingency of Australians going to Gaza on a flotilla.
Yes.
And they've been intercepted.
Flotilla. Yep.
Sorry, the what?
The Samud flotilla, I believe it's called.
Samud, yeah. So they have been intercepted, and what follows
what a shame.
is their reaction. But before I play their reaction, I just want to preface this with, what do you think would happen or could happen to you going into a genuine war zone? Either you get arrested, or you get blown to smithereens, or you get captured and raped and tortured. They're kind of your options. I think what happened to them is best case scenario, but we're going to play it because it's exactly as you'd expect. All right.
Okay.
Oh, why won't it allow me to present?
What if I do it? We have to remove, hang on, let me remove that because you removed it, not me. There you go, try again.
There we go. All right.
Sorry guys, a little backroom administration issue there.
Hi everyone, we're on the final leg of our journey. We hope to make it to Gaza in the next few days. If interception by the IOF does happen, it will likely be tonight or tomorrow night, which means at home that will be tomorrow morning or the morning after. So it's pretty vital to be paying attention right now. I want to make it clear that I'm here because the so-called Australian government is an active participant in the genocide of the Palestinian people. The Australian government is a colonial occupier of Indigenous lands across so-called Australia and has a vested interest in the continued genocide of First Nations peoples and Indigenous peoples all over the world. I also want to make clear that I have absolutely no expectation that the Australian government will do anything to ensure my safe passage home. So don't be surprised when that doesn't happen. They certainly don't care about me, and they probably don't care about you either. Free Palestine, fuck Australia, fuck Israel, down with the colonies, long live the resistance, and I hope to see everyone really soon.
What has happened? Sorry.
Can you imagine living with that level of misery going on inside of your head all of the time?
I was going to say, what has been done to these children, and they are kids because they're behaving like kids, is criminal. This is a form of child abuse. Filling their heads with this nonsense, this perpetual guilt that they have to carry around like this medallion on their chest. to the point where they're literally sailing into a war zone where you have hostile entities who do not give a fuck what you believe, whether you think you're they, them, you think you're there to save the world. These people strap suicide vests to themselves and go and blow up the people who literally put them back together after a failed suicide attempt. These people will rape you and don't give a fuck if you die. These people keep Yazidi women as slaves. These people don't give a fuck. And yet these girls, their brains have been rotted with this ideology that is so cancerous to them having any possible way of thinking with common sense and logic and rationality, so that they go and do this thinking this is like morally good. They're doing the right thing. It's fucking insane that we have allowed it to get to this point.
So let's not forget that it was only a couple of months ago in January that the remains of the last deceased hostage that that Hamas took on was it October 7th, 2023? Was it? Was that 2.5 years ago now? Gosh. The remains of the last deceased hostage were only repatriated a few months ago.
Yeah.
You know, to try and pretend that the conflict is happening in a vacuum, that it's about colonialism and Australia is supporting it because we have a vested interest in upholding colonial powers and genocides against Indigenous populations the world over. Like what?
This conflation of ideas is so nonsensical. It's so fucking, it's insane. That's what it is. And then they tie it in like Aboriginal struggles in Australia are the same as the Palestinians. No, they're fucking not. Hamas is a terrorist organization, and fundamentalist Islam is a death cult. Paired with that, with our freaking 300-year-old English ancestors that came over here to discover Australia and did horrific things to the Aboriginals, totally different things. Totally different. And need I remind people that most of our ancestors that came over here from England came here in fucking chains themselves. A lot of the people that came to Australia in the colonies didn't opt to come here.
Yeah. There were a lot of free settlers and things, but certainly there were convicts. But I think I can bring peace in the Middle East. I think I know what's needed. I think I know what's missing. And I think we should probably finish on this because it relates to peace in the Middle East, but also to the Victorian state election that's coming up fairly soon. And what I think will bring peace to the Middle East is watching a video of Avi.
Numbers for the third party that will be harvesting votes for One Nation at the next Victorian election.
Okay, I'm going to pause them a few times along the way. So for those that are a little bit behind, the Victorian state elections are the one place where there's still a thing called a group voting ticket where the party directs your preferences. A lot of people think that happens, in Australian federal elections and everywhere else. No, it only happens in Victoria. Everywhere else, your preferences go where you send them on your ballot. Victoria is the one exception. So I would like to see that abolished. So would Avi. So would Monica Smith, who will be relevant to this story in just a moment's time. But unfortunately, the powers that be have not changed that system. So Monica Smith and Avi Yemeni have each decided that they are going to weaponize this against the powers that be. Not because they think it should be the way that it is, but because they're hoping that this will force them to finally get rid of this archaic system that shouldn't exist. I'm going to play just a fraction more.
Even better news, there's still time to get the fourth over the line, and this one taps into a completely different voting block that I think you're gonna love. So yep, we did it. Thanks again to you, Save the Environment and Free Palestine have now both been filed with the Victorian Electoral Commission, and Muslim Votes Matter has officially hit the required 750 members. Well, 750 that we wanted, 500 members that you needed with a bit of a buffer, with that paperwork being prepared as we speak. So if you signed up to any of those parties, make sure you fill out the paperwork the VEC sends you and return it ASAP so the registrations can be completed in time. But now we're launching a fourth, targeting a completely different demographic. We need, again, another 750 members right now at avoidthefine.com.au or by scanning the QR code on your screen. And as the name suggests, we're targeting the 6 to 8% of people who only vote to avoid the fine.
There's mandatory voting in Australia, which is one of the only Western countries that still has this. Some people are waking up and are learning a little bit more about politics, but they're like still leaning towards how they always voted. Maybe they should be just not voting if they don't really have an inclination or a strong view. And that's what
All right, I'll stop it there, but you can go to Rebel News and you'll be able to find that video there. I absolutely love this. It's a fighting fire with fire approach. But to be absolutely clear, neither I nor Avi nor Monica, who's running the Environment Party, and I'm guessing neither you, Carly, actually approve of the group voting tickets. This isn't being done because we think it's a good system. This is being done because we think this might be the catalyst for this archaic and horrible system to finally be abolished.
I will present an alternative view. I was having a chat to Emily from Voice for Victoria, and she was saying this is a diabolical mess because if they do scrap the group voting ticket, it's going to stop people like David Limbrick being re-elected. And she was saying that, you know, what has happened, I mean, just recently, Labor, it was the High Court, wasn't it, that it repealed the restrictions on money donations. That just happened a few months ago. But there's a lot of other things that are in place that, you know, secure the uni party, basically. So the group voting ticket is a way that you get people in like Animal Justice Party, but you also get David Limbrick in. So that was her perspective. And it was important to sort of hear a different side of the thing. But I agree with you. I think the group voting ticket needs to be abolished like it has everywhere else.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of David Limbrick. I literally did an interview with him just earlier today before we recorded this, and I'll be publishing that in the next few days. But that same argument is also what got Rod Barton for the Transport Matters party elected, and he's the one who capitulated in return for a couple of $100 million compensation package for taxi drivers and gave Daniel Andrews his permanent pandemic powers bill that he wanted way back before the previous Victorian state elections. So I'm sorry, I don't find that a compelling argument because that's a blunt instrument that cuts in any direction and makes a mess in every direction. I would like to see Victoria match the New South Wales system where there are no group voting tickets, but also there are no districts in the upper house. The entire state is your upper house district. And what that means is the percentages required are relatively low. Let's Civics 101 here. We have two houses of parliament in most of Australia. Queensland's an exception. The lower house is about geographic representation. It's about your MP for your physical area. If something is wrong in your physical area, you go to your lower house MP because they have physical responsibility for that region. However, the upper house is the house of review, and you can think of that as the place where you pick your ideological representative. That's where we've designed the system differently on purpose so that people with only a few percentage points, at a federal level, it's only sort of 14%, and then for that last Senate seat in every state, it's only about 7% support for a given idea, for a given political party, for a given perspective. You can get a member of parliament who sees the world similarly to you into the upper house. That's its purpose. It's a different place. We don't have a lower and an upper house that are meant to be replicas of each other. We have them intentionally meant to be very, very different. So I would like to see I'd like to see Victoria adopt the New South Wales system where there are no regions. It is just statewide in the upper house, and therefore the percentage required statewide is actually quite low in order to be able to actually become elected, which means that lots of different niche ideologies, yes, the vegans and the Greens and the this and that, but also the libertarians can get a representative elected without too much difficulty. It's not impossible. So I would suggest that if Victoria copied the New South Wales system, then Emily's concerns would probably be, 80% resolved just there.
Yeah, I agree. And it'll be interesting to see what happens because Labor's kind of like damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they scrap it before the election, it's going to really hurt their chances of getting rid of it.
They're not going to scrap it. It's too late now. They're not going to scrap it before the election.
All right, one more story to end because I sent this to you and demanded you make a video on it and you just ignored me. So we're going to do it in the Oddcast.
Yep. I do that a lot, actually.
The glacier is on the verge of collapse, and it means seawater levels are going to rise by 3 meters. That means my house is going to be underwater.
I know, and we've never seen predictions of doom. That's right. We've never seen predictions of doom fail to come true at any point in the past. Can you just scroll through those images? We're going to read through them because there's some really interesting information here. the Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica. So this is part of the West Antarctic ice shelf. That'll be relevant a little later. Sometimes nicknamed the Doomsday Glacier. Oh my goodness, sounds important. Is about 120 kilometers wide and covers nearly the same area as Great Britain. So it's tiny, in other words. Now, satellite images show signs that its ice shelf, a 45 kilometer wide body of sea ice. So notice the bait and switch. They've said it's as big as the UK. Oh, but now we're only talking about a smaller piece of it. Right, it's the Doomsday Glacier, but now we're just talking about a piece of, notice that. A 45 kilometer wide body of sea ice that floats just off the glacier is breaking away. So it's not the glacier itself, that one that's the size of the UK. We're not talking about that anymore. Now, massive fractures are now visible around the grounding zone, which is where it comes from offshore to onshore. And the ice shelf is also moving a lot faster. Next picture, please. The British Antarctic Survey predicts the ice shelf's final demise. Oh, sounds terrible.
Doomsday.
As in, you mean the point at which it becomes an iceberg? Is that what you mean? Yeah, okay. Could happen suddenly. The word could is doing some heavy lifting in that sentence, and even has prepared an obituary. Yes, because ice is alive, and when it calves and becomes an iceberg, we have to give it a funeral. An obituary press release for it. Like, honestly, this is sickening. Though it's impossible to predict exactly when the ice shelf will rip away from the Thwaites Glacier. You mean when the laws of physics will do their thing and a massive iceberg will calve? Cool. It's impossible to predict when. Scientists expect the impact of its detachment will be significant. Now wait for it, because we're going to get technical here in a second. It could even open the door to the glacier itself collapsing. Next slide, please.
Can I just say, I love the use of the red text.
Oh, the use of red, isn't it great? Love this. Al Gore would be proud. Now, here's where we're going to get technical. The Thwaites Glacier has been shrinking for years. That is true. Do you know why?
That's what happens to glaciers?
Well, but also because underneath the West Antarctic ice shelf is massive amounts of, would you believe, volcanic activity. And in fact, a survey going back only a couple of years found that the amount of volcano and magma and volcanic activity underneath Antarctica was orders of magnitude more than what had previously been believed. So would you believe that a continent that has come alive with magma and volcanic activity, that glaciers are not doing so well on the western part of that continent? By the way, there's been massive ice gain on the eastern half of the same continent. They don't really talk about that. They just talk about the west because that's the bit where it's declining, because that's the bit that has massive volcanic activity. Moving on, the Thwaites Glacier has been shrinking for years and currently accounts for about 4% of all global sea level rise. Okay, so global sea level rise is running at a couple of millimeters per decade. It accounts for about 4% of that, or less than a millimeter per decade. That is what it currently accounts for. Now, keep that in the back of your mind. If or when the Thwaites Glacier collapses, it is expected to set off a domino effect across the West Antarctic ice sheet that could, again, the word could is doing a lot of heavy lifting, result in sea level rising by more than 3 meters. I would love to see the numbers behind the numbers on that one, because I tell you what, I strongly suggest that wherever they're pulling that particular thing out of, it is dirtier than if it came out of my butthole.
That was an analogy I didn't really need, but
it escalated quickly, I'll admit.
Yeah, I look at this and I'm like, I have been told this my whole life, that sea levels are rising, that it's all over. And until I see Barack Obama and all the people who have coastal properties sell in like a fire sale all their coastal properties, I will never believe this. I'm sorry, but if all of the celebrities and the rich people still have their coastal properties, all the people in the Hamptons in New York, don't buy it.
Yeah.
When I see
100%.
you put your money where your mouth is, and if you could still buy coastal properties for 30, 40, 50 mil, what's his name? Atlassian bloke. He's got how many coastal properties?
Cannon Brooks.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Not only are insurance companies still insuring properties, and people say, oh, but insurance is only bought 1 year at a time. It doesn't, you can't use that. No. Banks are giving 30-year loans on coastal properties, right? That's not a 1 year at a time thing. That's a bank saying, yeah, for 30 years. And also American banks, their whole loan system is different to ours. If the property loses value, the bank is on the hook, not the borrower, right? The loan is attached to the property, not the person. It's the reverse in Australia. So they are literally banking, they are betting the future of their institution on these coastal properties that they are lending money on still being worth at least as much as they're worth right now in 30 years. So no, I think the actuaries at insurance companies and the forecasters at finance companies, they don't believe the bullshit.
If this were to be legit in any way, there would be contingency plans. I mean, you look at somewhere like Japan that faces tsunamis often, and they've got all these massive breakwaters built and all these contingency plans built for genuine risks to tsunamis. They've got tsunami warnings. I literally live about 200 meters from the ocean. A 3-meter rise in the sea levels would put me basically underwater. And yet I don't see my rent going down.
Yeah, no, not at the moment, that's for sure. And look, let's touch on the history of predictions. Let's not forget that you go back to the 1970s when my parents were in school, they were taught that global cooling was the great threat. Now, that was a very short phase, but they were in that phase. They were taught that. By the late 70s, people had kind of cooled on that idea, if you'll pardon the pun. By the early 80s, Al Gore had come along and others had come along, and they had really begun to postulate this idea of global warming, which was convenient for them because actually from 1940 to 1970, the globe actually did cool. It's just part of the natural seesawing that does go on. And from 1970 till today, it has been very slowly warming. Now, what's interesting to me is that they've made prediction after prediction, including, by the way, predictions that were meant to come true by the year 2000. And these predictions are not difficult to verify whether they've happened or not. For example, the Arctic will be ice-free. Now, they object. We didn't mean that there would be no ice. What we meant was that it would be perfectly easy to navigate shipping across the north of Canada and the north of Russia during the summer months. Well, even so, even by that goalpost shift that you've done there, you're still wrong. You're not only wrong, you are very wrong, because actually ice mass in the Arctic right now is holding a trend that is significantly higher than the lowest levels that we've seen. So it's not actually even on a downward trend. It's on a complicated up and down trend. Things like cyclones were meant to get so much worse as the temperatures rose. Well, the temperatures have been rising. That's true. We are in an interglacial period. That's true. Where are the cyclones? The trend is sideways or down. This is stuff that you can look up. The same is true for global burned area in wildfires. It's sideways or down. The trend in deaths from natural disaster type weather type causes, that trend is dramatically down. Not because there's no natural disasters. There still are. There always have been and there always will be. But because we're a lot wealthier and we can deal with them a lot better. They don't kill us as often as what they used to. The only thing that's up is the value of the damage that is done by extreme weather. And this is something that they love to point to. Oh, look, extreme weather is costing us more than ever before. Yeah, that's because there's about 8 billion of us today, and we have on average an enormous amount more wealth and infrastructure, and a lot of it's built along coastlines, which are particularly vulnerable to extreme weather events. The dollar value of what we have is 100 times higher than what it was 100 years ago, and the damage bill from extreme weather has gone up maybe 2 or 3-fold. That you would expect that. We have a lot more to get damaged. So that makes perfect sense. In every other metric, you know, the islands of the Pacific are going to be sinking. Actually, on balance, most of them are growing. You can look at area after area. The predictions simply don't stack up. So forgive me if I seem a little bit cynical when I say, you know what? You can take your predictions about your so-called doomsday glacier and you can shove them as far up your derriere as you find enjoyable, which I'm guessing is a very, very long way. And then you can please just fuck off and leave the rest of us alone because we are getting on with life without you.
I want to end with this because, I mean, I have it out for Channel 9 for a multitude of reasons, but I mean, they've got bought out recently. I mean, I know they've absorbed Fairfax and things like that, but not to conflate issues, but they just got, it was discovered they tried to pay $700,000 in hush money to BRS's ex-girlfriend and things like that.
Yep.
You know, we see things like the ABC editing gunshots into footage. Like these media companies are complicit with, firstly, creating their own propaganda, I imagine for their own reasons, but second, in trying to manipulate the masses into believing something that is fundamentally not true. And I see things like this, like just the way this is written, that's why I wanted to share it, like the red doomsday collapse, like the the choice of words, the way it's been presented, it's designed to make you terrified. And some people will believe this, right? And it's the whole boy who cried wolf. As someone who's been told my whole life that the world's about to end in a, first it was the CFC, the ozone layers.
Oh, the hole in the ozone layer. Oh, yeah.
That it was the global warming and all the polar bears would be dead and Al Gore and all that nonsense.
You remember that one? Acid rain?
That's before my time. That's your era.
Was it? Okay. Yeah.
I see all these things and I'm like, you've been saying this my whole life. If anything actually came to fruition, I might take this with a little bit more serious lens. But I look at this and I go, I would love to see a day where these media companies are held accountable for being able to publish this shit, because this is the shit that ends up with that girl going to Gaza and being so radicalized and thinking that she's doing the world a load of good. It's because of this crap. This is dangerous propaganda, in my opinion.
You know, the irony is that the truest thing that Greta Thunberg has ever said is, you stole my childhood and my dreams.
Yeah, I agree.
Because her parents did. Her teachers did, the authorities did, the Green Movement did. They actually did that to her, but in precisely the opposite way to which she means it. She thinks she means that you've taken away my future because I won't have a future. What's actually happened is that her future has been stolen because she's given up on it. She's been convinced to believe a complete lie. And it's tragic. And we saw that in the girl that you played the video of with the Samud flotilla. Different issue, but the same phenomenon at work.
Yeah, they have been utterly brainwashed to the point where they're going to be robbed of a life, and they're going to carry this resentment, this hostility through all the way through to the end of their life. You can't deprogram people like Greta. People like this who believe it. Even as the world moves on to the next scandal or the next thing, whatever, these people will carry that. They'll never be productive members of society. They'll always be like, well, it's just more evidence that I was right. The system was rigged. The patriarchy.
I'm oppressed. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll just continue on.
So we need to wind up. We hope you enjoyed the interview with Senator Pauline Hanson, which we really, really, really hope happens. Otherwise, this is going to be the strangest episode that we've ever done.
Guys, we're meant to be doing it in half an hour, so that's the whole point.
So I'm led to believe that she's in another interview right now, that in just under half an hour, she'll become available to us, and that we will have her potentially for 45 minutes or more. You can tell me, viewers, because you will have already seen it, and we will edit that onto the start of this episode. So fingers crossed all of that happened. Otherwise, let's just pretend we never talked about it, right? Can we just agree that never talk about this again?
Yeah, and next time we say it, people will be like, I'm never going to believe you because you lied to me. Just like people lie about climate change.
That's right. All right, guys, thank you very much. Go to topherfield.com, get yourself an Oddcast bit of merch, get yourself some Topher merch, get yourself my books and my DVDs. That's how you can help me to keep doing what I'm doing with the Topher Project and to keep paying my bills, including Carly, who helps me with the Topher Project. And Carly, I'm led to believe, I hope I'm not, listen, I'm just going to do it anyway. I'm probably stealing your thunder. Not only do you have your AI course, which you should tell people about, but I'm led to believe that you're about to release some limited edition Carlz hoodies.
I am. I'm just trying to figure out what to put on them. So if you guys have any suggestions for what to put on the front, but I've got a few.
You're supposed to be like, I have had a dream since I was a child to put this particular thing onto a hoodie. That's what you're not like, gosh.
I like aesthetics. Wow. I don't know if people want to be like a billboard or you just want it to look cool, but it's going to be gradient hoodies. And I'm so pumped. I've got like the half zips and I've got like a proper hoodie and they're going to be decadent.
Put your face on it. Just put your face on it. That's it.
Like spicy or I don't know. I don't know. I've never been one for like wearing slogans on the front.
If Juicy could sell matching tracksuits with sequined Juicy written on the butt, ask me how I know. Then surely you can sell spicy. Like, come on. That's
but the issue
brand
is
right
people are going to assume it's OnlyFans, like, because that's what people do now. They say it's spicy content creator. I'm like, no, spicy is me.
Send the link to my OnlyFans. It's a win-win. You sell the hoodie, I get the OnlyFans. I think we can work together on this, Carly.
Yes, I'm getting the samples made at the moment. We'll see. Hopefully it all works out as I want. But also, Ari, the masterclass, the next one's coming up. And just to explain how it works, I have built an online community where all of the resources are in there and I give you guys weekly updates of what's going on in AI. But there is the beginners, the ultra beginners course, and then there's the I've been playing with AI, but I don't really know what I'm doing course. And the next one is going to be how to build a website from scratch using AI so that at the end of that masterclass, you have published a website that can do e-com, that can take in inquiries from customers, that can publish to the internet. It's ready to rock and roll. That is the whole point of it. This is the last time I will offer it at $149. It has gone up because the value is so significant. You get the ebook, 90 pages. You get the access to the 2 previous masterclasses and the next one, which is the website from scratch. It is $149. You can go to carlzjsoda.com and it's there. Last time, I'm really pumped with this because what I've learned in the recent weeks of just how quick this is moving, I'm like, guys, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is amazing. All right. And then with the Getting Your Head in the Game masterclass, guys, you're going to get the full PDF via email before tomorrow night's session. So you will now finally have the whole thing, which means that, yes, I have finally stopped obsessing and I finally let go of it and said, fly my pretties. And Carly has cleaned it up and taken all my formatting errors and spelling mistakes and fixed all of those. And we're sending it off to the printer. So you will get your physical copy, but you will have the entire booklet in PDF form for tomorrow night's session, which is session 3. This is all about focus, and it's a really pivotal one. We keep coming back to this focus concept over and over again as we go through the rest of this course. So if you're not a part of the Getting Your Head in the Game masterclass, topherfield.com, buy yourself a seat in the masterclass. You'll be supporting the channel at the same time. The first 2 sessions are already available for you to watch. They're already there in the school community that you will get access to once you've purchased. And then session 3 goes live tomorrow. You'll get an email with the full PDF. And yes, you will get a full printed version of the book, of the workbook as well. That is almost finally happening. Yay. Alrighty.
All right, guys, thank you so much. And to everyone, we had a whole host of people come through Ko-fi on Monday. So I want to say thank you so much to everyone who supports through Ko-fi. We love doing this. We love doing the Oddcast. We appreciate your messages. And I do try to write back to everyone, although sometimes there are a lot. And Topher keeps me busy. So I can't reply to everyone, but I do try. So that all being said, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed this episode with special guest Pauline Hanson. We hope.
It'd be so weird if she's not on it now.
Oh, gosh, we're going to look so stupid.